At 26 years old, Jin Tae-sung had achieved something most men only dreamed about. He had perfected the art of looking busy while doing absolutely nothing. At Orion Data Solutions, he could make one spreadsheet stay open for 8 hours. He knew which keyboard shortcut made random graphs appear. He knew how to place a coffee cup beside his mouse, so people assumed he had just stepped away. Most importantly, he had discovered that if he leaned his forehead against one hand and stared at the monitor with slightly narrowed eyes, everyone thought he was analyzing something complicated. In reality, Tae-sung was usually thinking about what anime he would watch when he got home. His co-workers hated this talent because somehow he survived every monthly review. His team leader hated it even more because Tae-sung could finish a 2-hour task in 20 minutes, then spend the remaining 7 hours pretending the company's server was processing. That trick worked until Monday morning, when team leader Park finally opened Tae-sung's browser history during a presentation. There were 43 anime forums, 12 episode guides, a ranking of fictional sword techniques, and one extremely detailed post titled, "Why the Villain Actually Had a Better Retirement Plan Than the Hero." The conference room went silent. Tae-sung looked at the projector, then he looked at Park, then he looked back at the projector like maybe the browser history belonged to somebody else. It did not. 10 minutes later, the director arrived. 5 minutes after that, security handed Tae-sung a cardboard box. His entire corporate career ended with a plastic cactus, 3 instant coffee sticks, a phone charger that probably belonged to somebody else, and a final warning from Park that his laziness would destroy his life. Tae-sung listened carefully, nodded with the seriousness of a man receiving ancient wisdom, and then asked if he could keep the cardboard box. Park nearly exploded. By noon, Tae-sung was unemployed. By 1, his bank app informed him he had enough money to survive for 11 days if he stopped eating things that required chewing. By 2, his landlord sent a message reminding him that rent was due on Friday. And by 3, the woman he had been casually seeing sent him a polite paragraph saying she needed someone with direction. Tae-sung stared at the phone from his bed. He considered getting up. He decided that was too much direction for one day. His apartment was barely larger than the cardboard box from Orion. The bed touched one wall. The desk touched another. The refrigerator opened only halfway because it collided with a chair. The tiny kitchen was close enough that Tae-sung could boil water without fully leaving his mattress if he stretched like a dying starfish. It was not glamorous, but the Wi-Fi was fast. And so, with his career destroyed and his future hanging over a cliff, Tae-sung opened his laptop and did what any responsible adult in his position would do. He started a 24-episode anime. The series was called Galactic Tutor. My Classroom is a Battleship. It followed a lazy teacher who accidentally became the commander of a school floating through space. Tae-sung picked it because the thumbnail had an explosion, a silver-haired captain, and a robot holding a chalkboard. He watched episode 1 while eating the last dumplings in his freezer. The moment the ending credits finished, the screen froze. A blue window appeared in the center of his laptop. Tae-sung blinked. The message read, "Episode completion verified. Intellectual growth system initialized." Below it, another line appeared. "Permanent intelligence increase, +1. Tae-sung stared at the screen for 10 full seconds. Then he laughed so hard he nearly fell off the bed. He assumed it was some weird pop-up advertisement. Maybe an anime site had finally discovered the perfect way to target unemployed men with delusions of greatness. He clicked the little X. The X moved away from his cursor. Tae-sung frowned. He tried again. The X moved again. Now he was offended. He chased it around the screen for almost a minute until a second message appeared. Host motor coordination judged embarrassing. Suggested content category: sports anime. Tae-sung stopped laughing. No advertisement had ever insulted him with that level of accuracy. Then his head became warm. It was not painful. It felt like the instant after waking from perfect sleep, except sharper. The clutter in his tiny apartment suddenly seemed organized. He could remember where every unpaid bill was. He could recall every number from the report Park had presented that morning. He could even remember the phone charger in his cardboard box belonged to Kim from accounting. Tae-sung opened a puzzle site he had used years ago. A logic problem that once took him 20 minutes now took 4. He opened another. 90 seconds. Another. 30 seconds. He sat upright. The system had not made him a genius. 1 point was not enough for that. But something had definitely changed. So naturally, Tae-sung made the most scientific decision possible. He clicked episode 2. 48 minutes later, after 2 more episodes, the system gave him 2 more permanent points. The effect stacked. By episode 5, his thoughts felt cleaner. By episode 8, he was predicting the plot because he could track every clue the writers had hidden in the background. By episode 12, he realized the fictional spaceship's fuel calculation was mathematically wrong. He paused the episode, found a notebook, and corrected it. Then he froze. Tae-sung had failed high school physics twice. He stared at the equation. The equation stared back in complete defeat. That was when the panic began. Not fear. Greedy panic. He checked the episode count. 12 episodes remained. Taesung's eyes widened like a miner who had just realized the dirt beneath his house was gold. He cancelled sleep. He watched until sunrise. The system did not care that he was unemployed. It did not care that he was lying in bed wearing shorts with a cartoon tiger on them. It only cared that he finished each episode from beginning to end. Skipping the opening was allowed, but skipping story content was not. Taesung discovered this when he tried jumping ahead 10 seconds during a boring recap and received a red message. Completion integrity compromised. Rewind required. Taesung called the system petty. The system replied, "Host may return to normal unemployment at any time." He rewound immediately. When episode 24 ended, a larger window appeared. Series completed. Bonus awarded. Accelerated learning. Basic tactical reasoning. Introductory astrophysics intuition. Taesung's mouth fell open. So individual episodes raised intelligence, but finishing an entire series could grant skills related to what he watched. That changed everything. The sun was rising over the city when Taesung opened his streaming list like a war general studying a battlefield. He no longer saw cartoons. He saw stats. A cooking anime was culinary skill. A detective anime was deduction. A sports anime was coordination. A courtroom anime was law. A business anime was negotiation. A medical drama was diagnostics. A ridiculous martial arts anime, where people punched mountains, was probably either very useful or extremely dangerous for his security deposit. Taesung created a spreadsheet. For the first time in his life, he made a spreadsheet voluntarily. He sorted 114 series by episode count, genre, expected skill reward, and what he called hot character bonus, which had no strategic purpose but improved morale. Then his stomach growled. Reality returned. Taesung had intelligence now. He still had no food. His refrigerator contained half an onion, chili paste, 1 egg, and something in a plastic container that had developed enough personality to deserve a name. He checked his bank account. 9 days of survival remained. That meant the Genius Era needed funding. Taesung selected a 12-episode cooking anime called Flame Ladle Academy, where teenage chefs settled arguments through meals so delicious that judges saw visions of their ancestors. He watched the entire thing in 1 day. The system rewarded him with 12 permanent intelligence points and a skill called Culinary Fundamentals, Advanced. Taesung walked into his kitchen feeling different. He looked at the onion. He looked at the egg. He looked at the suspicious container. He threw the suspicious container away. Intelligence had limits, and bravery was not stupidity. Then he made fried rice from almost nothing. The smell was so good his upstairs neighbor knocked on his door. Taesung opened it to find Ms. Lim, a retired woman who had spent 3 years complaining about his late-night footsteps. She sniffed once, forgot every complaint she had ever made, and asked what restaurant he had ordered from. Taesung told her he cooked it. She stared at him as if he had announced he was secretly royalty. 5 minutes later, she traded him a bag of vegetables and 2 packs of beef for 1 bowl. Taesung realized his first profitable business had begun accidentally. By evening, 3 neighbors were asking if he could cook dinner for them too. He made enough money to buy groceries and extend his survival clock by 2 days. But Taesung was not interested in becoming the king of apartment fried rice. He needed serious money. The next anime was Code Breaker Princess, a cyberpunk comedy about a spoiled princess who escaped assassination attempts by hacking everything from drones to vending machines. Taesung finished 13 episodes. His system rewarded programming, cybersecurity, pattern recognition, and something called keyboard efficiency. That last one sounded pathetic until he sat at his desk. His fingers moved so quickly the keys sounded like rain on a metal roof. He downloaded a public coding challenge used by major tech companies. The problem involved optimizing a delivery network across millions of possible routes. Taesung solved it in 17 minutes. Then he looked at the official solution. His version was faster. He laughed. Then he laughed harder. Then the landlord called. Rent was still due Friday. Taesung's laughter stopped immediately. He opened a freelance platform and started grabbing jobs that other programmers had abandoned. A broken inventory system, a crashed website, a database that duplicated customer orders every Thursday for reasons nobody understood. The old Taesung would have worked on 1 project for 3 days, complained for 2, and requested an extension on the 6th. The new Taesung completed all 3 before dinner. Clients thought he was using a team. One accused him of outsourcing. Taesung sent a screen recording proving he had done the work alone, while eating noodles with his free hand. That client paid a bonus. By Thursday night, Taesung had enough for rent. By Friday morning, he had enough for next month too. His landlord, Mr. Huang, arrived expecting excuses. Taesung paid early, handed him a container of braised beef, and casually mentioned that the building's water bill was high because the pressure regulator in the basement was failing. Mr. Huang blinked. He had not told Taesung about the water bill. Taesung had noticed the pipe vibration through the wall, remembered a maintenance diagram he had seen online years ago, and deduced the rest. Mr. Huang went downstairs. 20 minutes later, he came back looking like Taesung had performed witchcraft. The regulator was failing. Taesung's rent was reduced for 3 months. That was when he understood the real danger of the system. It was addictive. Every episode made the world easier. Every series turned impossible things into toys. So instead of going outside to celebrate, Taesung ordered enough snacks for a siege and watched Crimson Detective Agency, a mystery anime where a bored genius solved impossible crimes because he hated paperwork. After 16 episodes, deduction entered the system. Then came Iron Courtroom, which gave legal reasoning. Then came Goal Emperor, which gave athletic coordination and spatial awareness. Then came The Prince of Perfect Manners, which was technically a romantic comedy but somehow gave etiquette, fashion sense, and social perception. Taesung had selected that one as a joke. Halfway through, he stopped laughing. The social skill upgrade was terrifying. He could suddenly notice micro-expressions. He could tell when Ms. Lim was pretending not to want another serving. He could tell Mr. Huang was going to ask for technical help before the man opened his mouth. He could tell when clients were bluffing about their budgets. More importantly, Taesung looked in the mirror and finally understood why his old clothes made him resemble a man who had lost a fight with a laundry basket. He spent a small part of his freelance money on a haircut, fitted shirts, and shoes that were not designed for indoor slippers. The barber stared at the result. Taesung stared too. He had not become a model. The system had not changed his face, but posture, grooming, and confidence had done suspicious amounts of work. For the first time, he looked less like someone waiting for delivery and more like someone who might own the delivery company. That afternoon, his former coworker Kim called. Orion Data Solutions had a problem, a huge one. The company's most important client had discovered a forecasting error in Orion's software. The bug was causing warehouse demand predictions to drift by almost 18%. The director had ordered everyone to stay overnight until it was fixed. Kim sounded exhausted. Taesung almost felt bad. Then he remembered team leader Park's speech about how laziness would destroy his life. He opened another bag of chips. Kim begged him to look at the code remotely. Taesung agreed for a consulting fee 5 times his old daily salary. Park refused. The client threatened to cancel. Park agreed. Taesung received the files at 7:18 p.m. At 7:26, he found the problem. At 7:34, he fixed it. At 7:41, he found 3 additional problems nobody had noticed. At 7:55, he sent the patch, an optimization report, and a note recommending that Park stop blaming the database because the database was innocent. The call from Orion came immediately. The director demanded to know how Taesung had solved in 37 minutes what 14 employees had failed to solve in 2 days. Taesung gave the simplest answer. He said he had been resting. There was complete silence on the phone. Then the director offered him his old job back with a raise. Taesung looked at the anime paused on his laptop. He looked at the freelance payments piling up. He looked at the system window showing his intelligence had risen far beyond what any normal office evaluation could measure. Then he remembered the fluorescent lights, the fake smiles, and team leader Park's breath smelling like convenience store coffee. Taesung declined. The director doubled the offer. Taesung declined again. The director offered a private office. Taesung asked whether the office had a couch and unlimited streaming access. The director assumed he was joking. That was the director's mistake. Taesung ended the call. 2 days later, the corrected Orion software produced results so good that the client asked who had built the patch. The answer traveled. By Monday morning, Taesung had messages from 3 recruiters. By lunch, he had 7. By evening, he had 19. One came from ArcLight Technologies, the largest artificial intelligence company in the country. The recruiter did not offer an interview. She offered a car. Taesung stared at the message while lying in bed under a blanket. Midway through episode 8 of a mecha engineering anime, the system gave him another intelligence point. Then a second notification appeared. This one from the recruiter. Ms. Cha Yuna would like to meet you personally. Taesung knew that name. Everyone did. Cha Yuna was 31. Beautiful, terrifying, and the youngest chief executive in ArcLight's history. Business magazines called her the Ice Queen of Technology because she once fired an entire executive committee before breakfast and still made it to a charity gala by lunch. Taesung looked around his apartment. There were snack wrappers on the floor. Laundry was hanging from a lamp. His blanket had somehow become twisted around one leg. He looked back at the message. A billionaire executive wanted to meet him. The system chimed. New optional objective detected. Appear employable. Taesung sat up so fast he hit his knee on the desk. For the first time since being fired, leaving the apartment suddenly sounded interesting. The next morning, a black sedan stopped outside Taesung's apartment building. Half the neighborhood assumed somebody important had died. The other half assumed somebody important had arrived. Nobody guessed the important person was Taesung, who came downstairs carrying a convenience store coffee because he had stayed awake until 4 watching Steel Gear Professor. The driver opened the door and tried not to stare. Taesung's new clothes were sharp. His posture was different, but his eyes had the unmistakable look of a man who had spent the night learning fictional reactor mechanics from a robot with emotional problems. Inside the car, Taesung checked his system. The completed mecha series had given him mechanical engineering fundamentals, systems design, and advanced spatial visualization. He smiled. Arclight thought it was interviewing a programmer. It had no idea he had spent the previous night becoming an engineer too. Arclight Tower rose over the financial district like somebody had built a glass sword and stabbed it into the city. Employees in expensive suits moved through the lobby with the speed of people who believed being seen walking slowly could damage their careers. Taesung walked in holding his cheap coffee. A receptionist glanced at the cup, then at his name on the visitor list, and her expression changed instantly. He noticed the social perception skill was becoming more useful every day. She had expected somebody older, so had everyone else. Taesung was taken directly to the 48th floor, where an executive assistant led him into a conference room overlooking the entire city. At the far end of the table sat Cha Yuna. Taesung understood immediately why business magazines loved putting her on covers. She wore a fitted dark suit, her black hair tied back, her expression calm enough to make everyone around her nervous. There was no wasted movement, no nervous tapping, no checking her phone. Her eyes looked at Taesung once and seemed to measure his entire life. Most applicants would have panicked. Taesung had watched 68 episodes in 5 days, and had recently argued with a system window about whether ending credits counted as content. His standards for intimidation had changed. Yuna asked him to sit. Then, instead of beginning with polite questions, she pushed a tablet across the table. On the screen was a problem involving Arclight's newest language model. It was producing strange failures in multilingual reasoning. The research team had spent 6 weeks tracing the issue. Taesung read the report. 30 seconds passed. Yuna watched him. 1 minute passed. Taesung scrolled twice. Then he asked whether the engineers had tested token allocation after dynamic compression. The executive assistant's eyes widened. Yuna's expression barely moved, but Taesung caught the tiny narrowing of her pupils. That was surprise. She said they had. Taesung asked to see the raw benchmark logs. Yuna slid him another file. He read for 3 minutes. Then he pointed to a sequence nobody had highlighted. The model was not failing because of language. It was failing because a memory optimization system was compressing certain linguistic structures too aggressively. The smarter the sentence became, the more likely the optimization layer was to throw away the exact relationship needed to reason about it. In other words, Arclight's AI was becoming stupid because engineers had tried too hard to make it efficient. Taesung found that deeply relatable. Yuna asked how long a fix would take. Taesung said maybe 2 hours. Her assistant almost coughed. Yuna asked if he could prove it. Taesung checked the time. He had planned to finish 3 episodes of an aerospace anime before lunch. He decided the episodes could wait. For now, Arclight gave him a secure workstation. Within 20 minutes, engineers began gathering behind him. Within 40, department heads were standing at the door. At 1 hour, somebody called the chief research officer. At 93 minutes, Taesung ran the new benchmark. The error rate dropped by 71%. The room went silent. One senior engineer asked what framework he had used. Taesung explained that he had rewritten part of the compression logic and changed the memory routing architecture. The engineer looked offended, impressed, and personally betrayed by mathematics. Yuna asked everyone else to leave. When the door closed, she placed a contract in front of Taesung. The salary was more money than he had ever made. The signing bonus could buy his entire apartment floor. The title was Senior Research Strategist, a position usually held by people with doctorates, patents, and enough conference badges to build armor. Taesung read the contract slowly. Then he shook his head. Yuna's assistant looked like she had just witnessed a man reject oxygen. Yuna asked what he wanted. Taesung had spent the previous night thinking about exactly this. He wanted remote work 4 days a week. He wanted no mandatory morning meetings before 11. He wanted a private office with a couch for the one day he came in. He wanted unrestricted access to Arclight's technical library. And he wanted permission to watch anime during work hours without anybody asking questions. The assistant stared at him. Yuna stared longer. Then, unexpectedly, one corner of her mouth moved. It was almost a smile. She asked if the anime was part of his process. Taesung said yes. That was not technically a lie. Yuna accepted every condition. Taesung signed. By the time Team Leader Park heard the news, Taesung had gone from fired office worker to senior strategist at the most prestigious technology company in the country in less than 2 weeks. Park read the announcement 3 times. Then he closed his office door and screamed into his jacket. Taesung's first day at Arclight began at 11:07 a.m. He arrived late by 7 minutes and found a custom couch already inside his private office. There was also a large monitor, a workstation worth more than his old annual salary, and a handwritten note from Yuna telling facilities to install soundproofing. Taesung respected efficiency. He placed his laptop on the desk and started episode 1 of Brain Surgeon Samurai. His new co-workers walked past the glass wall and saw the company's mysterious genius watching an animated doctor cut open a robot while eating pastries. Rumors spread immediately. Some thought he was studying visual cognition. Some thought he was testing animation compression. One intern claimed Taesung only watched anime because normal information moved too slowly for his brain. Taesung heard that rumor and almost corrected it. Then he decided it sounded impressive. He let it grow. By the end of the week, employees were whispering that disturbing Taesung during an episode could ruin an experiment. This was extremely convenient. The system was growing faster now because Taesung could afford better food, better streaming subscriptions, and a chair that did not attack his spine. He built a schedule around maximizing skill coverage, morning comedy for mood and social nuance, midday technical series for practical upgrades, evening strategy anime for reasoning, late-night romance anime, which he insisted was research. The romance category became unexpectedly powerful. A 24-episode series called Duchess of the Last Train gave him emotional perception, conversational timing, formal dance basics, and an almost unfair sense of when someone was becoming interested in him. That final ability became relevant sooner than expected. Yuna started visiting his office. At first, she came with technical questions. Then she came with project updates. Then she began appearing with coffee even when there was no project. Taesung noticed the pattern by the third visit. His upgraded social perception noticed it by the first. Yuna would stand beside his desk while he worked, leaning slightly to look at his screen. She always dressed professionally, but professional clothing did nothing to hide the fact that she was stunning. One afternoon, she bent over his chair to point at a simulation and her perfume drifted close enough to destroy 3 seconds of his concentration. The system immediately displayed a warning. Focus instability detected. Taesung mentally told it to mind its business. The system replied, host performance decline, 4%. Taesung minimized the window before Yuna could see it. Yuna asked what he was hiding. Taesung said classified research. Technically true again. ArcLight soon gave him a larger challenge. The company had spent $80 million developing an autonomous warehouse robot called Atlas. During public demonstrations, Atlas worked perfectly. During internal testing, it occasionally developed what engineers described as pathing indecision. Taesung watched the footage. The 2-meter robot approached a stack of boxes, turned left, turned right, rotated in a complete circle, and then stood still for 40 minutes. It looked less like advanced robotics and more like Taesung choosing what to order for dinner. The engineering team blamed sensors. The software team blamed hardware. The hardware team blamed environmental noise. The project manager blamed everyone. Taesung asked for 12 hours. Then he went home and binge-watched all 13 episodes of Factory Hero, I Reincarnated as a Forklift. The title was humiliating. The skill reward was not. Industrial automation, robotic path planning, machine vision fundamentals, safety systems. Taesung returned the next morning, analyzed Atlas, and discovered the robot's planning system was receiving too many equally weighted safe choices. Whenever several routes were almost identical, the machine kept reconsidering them instead of committing. It was not confused because it lacked options. It was confused because it had too many. Taesung changed the priority model, added a decision decay factor, and reduced sensor conflict loops. Atlas began moving smoothly. Then Taesung added one small experimental routine. When Atlas encountered identical routes, it chose the one requiring less energy. That reduced power consumption by 11%. The engineering team looked at Taesung like he had descended from a mountain carrying sacred source code. Yuna looked at him differently. She was no longer simply curious. She was interested, and Taesung knew it. 3 weeks after joining ArcLight, he was invited to an executive dinner at the Meridian Hotel. Taesung disliked executive dinners because they contained too many forks and not enough food. So he prepared by watching Elegant Tyrant's Dining Table, an anime about a prince who defeated political enemies through etiquette, wine knowledge, and terrifyingly polite insults. The full series gave Taesung fine dining etiquette, negotiation, table manners, and formal conversation. He arrived at the Meridian wearing a tailored suit and looked so comfortable in the luxury setting that several executives assumed he came from money. He did not. His childhood home had once used a broken rice cooker as furniture, but permanent skill boosts did not care about childhood. The dinner included Yuna, ArcLight board members, 2 foreign investors, and a guest named Seo Mira. Mira was 29, heiress to the Sioran Group fortune, founder of an investment fund, and famous enough that financial news channels tracked her airport outfits. She entered 10 minutes late wearing a red dress that turned every head in the room, every head except Taesung's. He was studying the dessert menu. Mira noticed. That alone made him interesting. She sat across from him. Throughout dinner, she tested him. She asked what he thought about artificial intelligence valuations. Taesung gave a concise answer. She asked about automation risk. He answered that too. Then she tried a trick question about a company her fund had recently purchased. Taesung had never heard of it, but he read her wording, noticed what details she emphasized, and deduced that she did not actually care about the company. She wanted to see whether he would pretend to know something. So Taesung calmly admitted he had no idea. Mira smiled. Then he added that based on her question, the acquisition had probably been made for its logistics patents rather than revenue. Her smile disappeared. That was exactly why she had bought it. Yuna saw the reaction. Her gaze moved from Mira to Taesung. Taesung suddenly realized he had entered a different kind of battlefield. The system chimed in his mind. Social tension detected. Suggested content category: romantic comedy. Taesung nearly choked on his steak. Mira asked if he was all right. He said the steak was excellent. She leaned forward, her neckline dipping just enough to be distracting, and asked whether Arclight had locked him into an exclusive contract. Taesung said no. Yuna answered at the exact same time and said his employment terms were confidential. Mira's smile became brighter. The rest of dinner was a quiet war disguised as polite conversation. Mira offered Taesung access to Surin's private research network. Yuna reminded her that Taesung already had access to Arclights. Mira suggested he should visit her fund's headquarters. Yuna mentioned he had a very full schedule. Taesung, meanwhile, ate dessert and watched two billionaires compete over his calendar. Being fired was starting to feel like the best thing that had ever happened to him. The next morning, the situation became even stranger. A courier delivered a limited edition streaming console to his apartment. The card was from Mira. An hour later, another package arrived. Inside was a premium ergonomic recliner. The card was from Yuna. Taesung looked at the console. He looked at the recliner. Then he looked at his system. For once, the system displayed no suggestion. Taesung nodded slowly. Even supernatural intelligence knew when to stay out of rich woman politics. But his peaceful binge-watching era did not last. Arclight's biggest competitor, Kestrel Dynamics, announced the Helios Challenge, a public international competition offering $10 million to any team that could solve 3 unsolved engineering and artificial intelligence problems in 72 hours. Kestrel's chairman clearly intended it as marketing. The problems were so difficult that most researchers assumed nobody would finish even one. Then Kestrel's arrogant young vice chairman, Do Jun-hyuk, gave an interview saying Arclight's recent breakthroughs were probably exaggerated. He specifically mentioned the mysterious couch engineer rumored to watch cartoons at work. The internet immediately connected the description to Taesung. Within hours, his name was trending. Clips of him entering Arclight were everywhere. Some people called him a genius. Some called him a fraud. Some called him handsome. Taesung considered the third group the most credible. Yuna came to his office and told him he did not need to respond. Taesung looked at the Helios Challenge rules. $10 million. 3 impossible problems. 72 hours. He opened his anime spreadsheet. There were exactly 36 hours of relevant content he had not watched yet. Taesung smiled. For the first time, someone had publicly questioned whether anime could make him rich. That was personal. Taesung entered the Helios Challenge under one condition. He wanted to compete alone. Yuna thought he was joking. The contest allowed teams of up to 12 specialists. Universities were assembling professors. Kestrel had entered an internal team filled with engineers whose combined resumes looked heavy enough to injure someone. Taesung wanted 1 chair, 1 laptop, a refrigerator, and a second monitor for anime. Yuna stared at him for several seconds, then asked what kind of refrigerator. That was why Taesung liked working with her. She adapted quickly. The Helios Challenge was held inside Kestrel's massive convention center and streamed worldwide. Each team received an enclosed glass workspace, so viewers could watch them struggle in real time. When Taesung arrived alone, the commentators thought Arclight was making a publicity stunt. Do Jun-hyuk thought the same thing. Jun-hyuk was 30. Rich, polished, and born with the confidence of a man who had never been told his premium subscription had expired. He greeted Taesung with a smile that looked friendly until the eyes were included. He asked where Taesung's team was. Taesung pointed at his laptop. Jun-hyuk asked whether the laptop had a doctorate. Taesung said no, but it had excellent battery life. That clip went viral before the contest even began. The first challenge involved disaster response drones. Teams needed to create a control system capable of mapping a collapsed city, while communication signals changed unpredictably. The second involved a material simulation so complex that existing software took 6 hours to process a single design. The third was kept secret until the final day. Taesung had prepared for drones by finishing Sky Courier Battalion, a military comedy about delivery pilots fighting weather monsters. The system rewarded flight dynamics, control systems, and advanced mapping intuition. For the simulation problem, he watched Alchemist of the Steel Moon, which somehow granted material science because the fictional magic system was suspiciously obsessed with crystal structures. Taesung did not question gifts. At the opening signal, every team exploded into activity. People ran between whiteboards. Engineers shouted numbers. Assistants carried coffee like emergency medicine. Taesung opened a bag of seaweed chips. For the first hour, he barely typed. The commentators became confused. Junhyuk's team was already writing code. A university team had 3 simulations running. Taesung was watching drone footage and eating. Then he put down the chips. His fingers moved. The keyboard became a machine gun. His upgraded brain was no longer solving one problem at a time. He was layering them. Wind, signal loss, battery consumption, route priority, collision risk, terrain uncertainty. Each factor became part of one giant moving model in his head. 2 hours later, Taesung submitted a drone controller. The judges assumed he had misunderstood the requirements because everyone else predicted at least 12 hours of work. They tested it anyway. The simulation began with 20 drones flying into a digital city after an earthquake. The network went down. Taesung's drones created their own temporary communication web. GPS failed. They mapped position using relative motion and shared landmarks. A building collapsed. The swarm split automatically, rerouted, and preserved battery reserves for rescue zones. Then one drone was destroyed. The others redistributed its assigned search area in less than a second. The judges ran the test again with harder conditions. Taesung's score increased. They ran it a third time because they thought the scoring system was broken. It was not. Taesung finished first by a margin so large that the live chat stopped debating whether he was a fraud and began debating whether he was human. Junhyuk's smile disappeared. The second challenge started immediately. This time Taesung made a mistake. Not a technical mistake, a scheduling mistake. He had only slept 4 hours in the previous 2 days. Permanent intelligence did not make his body permanent too. Halfway through the materials problem, his vision blurred. The system displayed a yellow warning. Cognitive hardware requires maintenance. Taesung muttered that his cognitive hardware had a deadline. The system replied, "Host remains mammalian." He hated when it became smug. Taesung tried coffee, then more coffee, then a canned energy drink that tasted like radioactive fruit. Nothing worked. Yuna watched from the private viewing area, recognized the problem, and ordered security to clear Taesung's glass room. Then she walked inside herself. Viewers expected an emergency strategy meeting. Instead, Yuna closed Taesung's laptop. She told him to sleep. Millions of people watched the country's most feared tech executive tuck a travel pillow behind her genius employee's head and set a 90-minute alarm. Taesung was too tired to protest. He fell asleep in 30 seconds. The internet lost its mind. Mira, watching from her office, immediately posted that Arclight clearly needed better resting facilities. 20 minutes later, Sioran Group's luxury furniture division offered to sponsor Taesung's chair. Yuna's legal department rejected the offer in 6 minutes. When Taesung woke up, he had no idea that a chair war had begun across social media. He just felt better. And because his brain was now capable of terrifying compression, the 90-minute nap restored enough focus to finish the materials algorithm in 4 more hours. His solution did not merely accelerate the simulation, it changed the method completely. Instead of calculating every molecular interaction directly, Taesung created a layered approximation system that learned which regions required precision and which could be simplified without affecting the result. Processing time fell from 6 hours to 9 minutes. One judge stood up without realizing it. Another asked for the raw code. A third whispered something that sounded suspiciously like prayer. By the end of day 2, Taesung had a huge lead. That was when Kestrel revealed the final challenge. It was not a coding problem. It was not engineering either. A sealed laboratory contained a prototype fusion control system built from decades of research. The challenge was to stabilize a simulated plasma field under changing conditions. Teams could study the hardware, the mathematical model, and previous failed attempts. Taesung's smile faded. He knew programming, engineering, materials science, tactical systems. He did not know plasma physics. Not enough. Junhyuk knew it too. Kestrel's internal team included 2 fusion researchers. For the first time, Taesung was behind before the clock even started. Yuna asked whether he wanted Arclight to add specialists for the last round. The rules allowed late team additions with a score penalty. Taesung refused. He checked the contest clock. 11 hours remained before the final challenge opened. Then he checked his streaming list. A 26-episode series stared back at him. Star Furnace Academy. It was about students learning to operate miniature suns inside giant space stations. Total runtime at normal speed was nearly 10 hours if openings and endings were skipped. Taesung looked at the title. Then he looked at the countdown. Yuna understood instantly. She asked whether he seriously planned to prepare for fusion science by watching cartoons all night. Taesung said the alternative was learning it from textbooks all night. Yuna considered that. Then she ordered catering. Taesung began the most important binge watch of his life. Star Furnace Academy was terrible. The first episode contained 3 minutes of screaming. Episode 4 introduced a talking wrench. Episode 9 had a beach festival inside a reactor facility for reasons that violated several safety laws. By episode 14, Taesung wanted to surrender to Kestrel out of principle, but the system kept rewarding him. 1 intelligence point. Another. Plasma intuition began forming. Magnetic confinement. Thermodynamics. Reactor safety. Field control. The fictional science was ridiculous, but the system extracted real concepts from whatever knowledge the series represented. Taesung's brain filled gaps automatically. By episode 21, he was pausing to derive equations. By 24, he understood why Kestrel's previous approaches had failed before seeing their data. At 6:42 a.m., episode 26 ended. The system flashed brighter than usual. Series completion bonus. Advanced plasma systems, nonlinear control theory, high-energy physics intuition. Then another message appeared. Milestone reached. Total permanent intelligence gains exceed 100. Taesung felt something change. For several seconds, the world seemed slow. Not literally. His perception had simply become so efficient that ordinary moments contained more information. He could hear air conditioning fluctuations. He noticed a flicker in a hallway light and predicted the ballast was failing. He glanced at Yuna's coffee and knew from the untouched surface that she had been too worried to drink it. He looked at her. She had stayed all night. Her normally perfect hair had loosened around her face. She had removed her jacket and rolled her sleeves. She looked tired, elegant, and far less distant than the woman from the first interview. Taesung thanked her. Yuna told him to win before she regretted encouraging this nonsense. He grinned. The final challenge began. Kestrel's team rushed into equations immediately. Taesung did not. He studied every failed test. 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10. The commentators became nervous again. Then Taesung saw it. Everyone was treating instability as an enemy to eliminate. But the system itself was causing part of the instability by correcting too aggressively. Every time plasma moved, control coils reacted. Plasma responded to the coils. The system reacted again. It was like two people trying to pass each other in a narrow hallway, both moving left, then both moving right, forever. Taesung rewrote the controller to predict oscillation instead of chasing it. The first test lasted 8 seconds longer than Kestrel's best record. Junhyuk's face tightened. Taesung adjusted 3 parameters. The second test lasted 41 seconds longer. He changed the field timing. The third test stabilized completely. Nobody moved. The simulated plasma burned at target conditions for 1 full minute. Then 2, then 5. The judges stopped the test manually because there was nothing left to prove. Taesung had solved all 3 Helios problems. Alone. The convention center erupted. ArcLight employees screamed. Reporters rushed the barriers. The online stream jumped by millions of viewers within minutes. Junhyuk stood beside his defeated research team with the expression of a man watching his family name turn into a reaction meme. Taesung walked onto the stage to receive the $10 million prize. The host asked how he had prepared for such different fields. Taesung looked directly at the cameras. He said he watched a lot of anime. The audience laughed. Taesung did not. That made them laugh harder. Within 24 hours, his answer became the most replayed clip from the entire event. Anime streaming subscriptions spiked. Tech workers posted photos of themselves watching shows at their desks and calling it research. Employers panicked. Taesung became famous by accident, and fame immediately created new problems. His apartment building became unusable. Fans waited outside. Reporters followed delivery drivers. Someone left a life-size cardboard cutout of Taesung next to the entrance wearing a cape and holding a laptop. Mr. Huang loved the attention until 3 different vloggers tried to interview the water pressure regulator in the basement. Taesung had to move. Mira offered him a penthouse owned by Seorin Group. Yuna offered a secure corporate residence. Taesung chose neither. He used part of the prize money to rent the top floor of a quiet high-rise with private elevator access, floor-to-ceiling windows, a theater room, and a bedroom large enough that his old apartment could fit inside the closet. The first thing he bought was a massive bed. The second was a giant television. The third was a snack cabinet with fingerprint access. Taesung had learned important lessons from poverty. He simply learned the wrong ones. His new lifestyle became absurd quickly. One afternoon he would advise ArcLight on robotics. The next morning he would solve a freelance encryption problem for a government contractor. Then he would spend 6 straight hours watching a romantic comedy about a bakery run by ghosts. The system rewarded pastry technique and interpersonal empathy. Taesung accepted both. Soon his skills covered dozens of fields. He could cook restaurant-quality meals, repair electronics, optimize supply chains, understand contracts, design machines, write software, play basic piano, identify rare wines, throw a baseball accurately, dance formally, and detect lies with unsettling consistency. This was when Dr. Han Sora entered his life. Sora was 32, a celebrated neuroscientist from Hunsung National University. She had degrees from 3 elite institutions, a national research medal, and a reputation for humiliating television hosts who asked stupid questions about the brain. She requested to study Taesung. Taesung refused. She requested again. Taesung refused again. She sent him a 30-page scientific argument explaining why his learning speed should be impossible. Taesung read it during episode 7 of Ninja Veterinarian. He wrote margin notes correcting 2 assumptions and sent it back. Sora appeared at ArcLight the next morning. She walked into Taesung's office without an appointment, wearing a white blouse, a pencil skirt, and the focused expression of someone willing to commit minor crimes in the name of data. She dropped the printed paper on his desk. Every page was covered in his notes. She demanded to know how he understood a specialized neurological model she had spent 6 years developing. Taesung looked at the television behind her. He had recently completed Mind Labyrinth, an anime about detectives entering dreams. The series had given him neuroscience fundamentals and cognitive modeling. He said he read quickly. Sora did not believe him for 1 second. That was fine. Taesung had enough intelligence to know some mysteries were more valuable unopened. Sora decided she would uncover his secret. Taesung decided she was amusing. Yuna decided she did not like how often Sora visited. Mira decided the entire situation was hilarious, and began inviting Sora to dinner specifically to annoy Yuna. Taesung's life had somehow become a high-budget romantic comedy with quarterly earnings. Then Junhyuk made his next move. Kestrel announced it had developed an artificial intelligence called Oracle that could allegedly outperform Arclight systems across finance, logistics, medicine, research, and strategic planning. The demonstration was scheduled for 1 month later. Industry analysts called it the biggest technological event of the decade. Yuna received confidential reports suggesting Kestrel had spent nearly $3 billion on Oracle. If the demonstration succeeded, Arclight could lose major contracts overnight. Taesung watched the presentation trailer once, then twice. On the third viewing, he noticed something everyone else missed. Oracle was not just answering questions. It was predicting the demonstrator's next question before the man finished speaking. That should not have been possible from the model architecture Kestrel publicly claimed to use. Taesung paused the video. His smile disappeared. For the first time since gaining the system, he saw a problem that felt genuinely dangerous, because either Kestrel had built technology far beyond what anyone knew existed, or somebody else had found a shortcut too. Taesung did not tell Yuna about his suspicion immediately. He did something much more responsible. He went home, ordered fried chicken, and searched his anime list for anything involving prediction. There were several options. One was a gambling anime, where students bet entire corporations on card games. One was a detective series about a mathematician who predicted crimes using probability. One was a supernatural romance, where a girl could see 3 seconds into the future, whenever someone lied to her. Taesung watched all of them. 37 episodes later, his intelligence climbed again, and the system added probability theory, game theory, behavioral forecasting, advanced statistics, and a strange little skill called anticipatory reading. That last one did not let him see the future. It was almost worse. By combining body language, probability, habits, and context, Taesung could often predict what a person was about to do before they did it. When his food delivery arrived, he opened the door before the driver knocked. The driver nearly dropped the bag. Taesung apologized, then spent the next hour experimenting. He predicted when a television host would interrupt a guest. He predicted which elevator would open first. He predicted that Mira would call him at 9:12 p.m. She called at 9:11. Taesung felt cheated. Mira had received an invitation to Kestrel's pre-launch gala for Oracle. More importantly, she had a +1. Taesung accepted. When Yuna found out the next morning, she did not raise her voice. That was how Taesung knew she was annoyed. She calmly explained that entering Kestrel territory as Mira's guest might create the appearance that he was considering defecting. Taesung asked whether she would prefer him to attend as her guest instead. Yuna went silent for exactly 1 second too long. Then she said yes. Mira heard about this and immediately refused to surrender her invitation. The argument ended with a ridiculous compromise. Taesung would arrive with Mira because her invitation included access to investor areas, then attend the main reception beside Yuna because Arclight had an official corporate table. Sora heard about the arrangement and invited herself as Taesung's scientific consultant. By the night of the gala, Taesung had somehow acquired 3 dates to an event he did not want to attend. The system called this rapid social advancement. Taesung called it a scheduling problem. The gala filled Kestrel's new headquarters, a curved black tower designed to look futuristic and expensive. Security was intense. Facial recognition cameras tracked guests. Private guards stood near research corridors. Every executive wore a smile polished by years of pretending competitors were friends. Mira arrived in a silver dress with an open back and enough confidence to make photographers forget who else was entering. She linked her arm through Taesung's as if the decision had been made years ago. Taesung felt every camera turn toward them. He also felt Mira lean a little closer than necessary. His system displayed a useless notification. Heart rate increased. Taesung mentally asked whether it had recently become a medical gossip application. It did not answer. Inside, Mira played her role perfectly. She introduced Taesung to investors, board members, and Kestrel executives, while pretending this was purely social. Taesung smiled, shook hands, and used his enhanced perception to gather more information than anyone realized. One executive was nervous whenever Oracle's hardware was mentioned. Another kept looking toward a restricted elevator. A research director claimed the project had taken 4 years, but her expression showed discomfort when someone congratulated her on 4 years of breakthroughs. Taesung filed everything away. Then Yuna arrived. She wore a deep blue evening gown instead of her usual business suit. And for one rare moment Taesung's brain stopped processing useful information. Yuna noticed. She smiled. The Ice Queen had discovered a weapon. Mira noticed too. Her grip tightened around Taesung's arm. Then Sora appeared in a black dress and glasses, looking like a scientist had accidentally wandered into a fashion campaign. She took one look at Mira holding Taesung's arm, one look at Yuna watching them, and calmly stepped to Taesung's other side. Taesung had solved plasma instability. He had repaired artificial intelligence systems worth billions. He had defeated teams of international researchers alone. He had no strategy for this. The system suggested a harem comedy called Landlord of Seven Princesses. Taesung promised himself he would watch it later, for survival. The gala demonstration began at 9. Junhyuk walked onto the stage and presented Oracle as the first predictive general intelligence platform designed for real-world decision support. The system answered medical questions, forecast supply shortages, designed an aircraft component, analyzed a legal dispute, and predicted an audience member's choice in a live test. Applause filled the room. Taesung watched carefully. Oracle was extraordinary, but it had a weakness. Its answers were too smooth. Every intelligent system made trade-offs. Speed versus precision. Creativity versus reliability. Depth versus compute. Oracle seemed to make none. That meant the performance was being shaped. Taesung looked at Sora. She had noticed something too. The medical answer Oracle gave used a rare phrasing pattern from an unpublished research paper. Sora's unpublished research paper. She leaned close to Taesung and whispered that only 6 people had access to that draft. Taesung's attention sharpened. One of those 6 had consulted for Kestrel 2 years earlier. Now the pieces began moving. Oracle was not magic. It was fed with stolen private datasets, unreleased research, confidential corporate information, and likely enormous amounts of illegally acquired behavioral data. The reason it appeared to predict questions was because Kestrel had profiled many of the people in the room before they arrived. The demo was impressive because the stage had been prepared around the audience. Taesung almost admired the audacity. Almost. Then Junhyuk made a mistake. He invited Taesung onto the stage. The crowd erupted. Junhyuk smiled and asked whether Arclight's famous genius wanted to test Oracle personally. Yuna's eyes narrowed. Mira grinned because she loved chaos. Sora looked ready to dissect the machine with her bare hands. Taesung walked onto the stage. Junhyuk told him to ask Oracle any technical question. Taesung asked a simple one. What would he ask next? Oracle answered that Taesung was likely to ask about artificial intelligence architecture. Taesung asked about soup. The audience laughed. Oracle gave a recipe. Taesung asked for the tensile strength of a fictional alloy from an obscure anime. Oracle hesitated, then hallucinated an answer. Taesung asked a legal question in archaic phrasing. Oracle slowed. He followed with a probability puzzle containing intentionally misleading information. Oracle produced a confident but incorrect result. The room became quieter with each failure. Junhyuk's smile hardened. Taesung was not trying to prove Oracle was stupid. It clearly was not. He was forcing it outside the zones Kestrel had prepared. Then he delivered the real strike. Taesung asked Oracle to summarize the unpublished neurological paper, whose phrasing Sora had recognized. Junhyuk's expression changed, only slightly, but Taesung saw it. Oracle began answering. Sora stood up from the audience. The room froze. The paper had never been released. Junhyuk immediately claimed the system was generating a hypothetical answer. Sora walked toward the stage and asked Oracle for the name of the temporary variable used in experiment set 17. Oracle gave it. Sora's face went cold. That variable existed only in her private draft and internal lab files. Reporters began typing furiously. Kestrel security moved. Yuna moved faster. She was already on the phone with Arclight legal counsel. Mira was texting her fund managers. Taesung stood beside Junhyuk as the most important product launch of Kestrel's history collapsed in real time. Junhyuk leaned toward him and quietly said Taesung had no idea what he was interfering with. Taesung glanced at the giant Oracle logo behind them. Then he said Junhyuk should have trained his AI on better manners. The microphone was still live. The audience heard everything. By midnight, Kestrel's share price was falling in after-hours trading. Regulators announced an inquiry. Universities demanded audits. Companies that had shared pilot data with Kestrel started checking whether private information had been used without permission. Junhyuk's grand victory turned into a disaster before dessert was served. Taesung returned home at 2 in the morning. He should have slept. Instead, he watched 3 episodes of Landlord of Seven Princesses. The system rewarded him with romantic crisis management. Taesung considered that mockery. He still finished the series by sunrise. The reward became useful immediately. Mira showed up at his penthouse at 10 carrying breakfast. Yuna arrived at 10:15 with documents from the Kestrel investigation. Sora arrived at 10:20 because she wanted to discuss her stolen research. All 3 women looked at each other. Then they looked at Taesung. He was wearing a robe, holding chopsticks, and had not brushed his hair. Somehow this made the situation worse. Mira walked straight inside and claimed the best seat on the sofa. Yuna entered because she refused to be left in the hallway. Sora entered because personal boundaries became irrelevant when science was involved. Taesung's peaceful breakfast became a strategic summit. Mira argued that Kestrel's collapse created an investment opportunity. Yuna wanted to protect Arclight from any connected data exposure. Sora wanted to identify exactly how her research had been stolen. Taesung listened while eating. Then he connected all three problems. Oracle's stolen training data had not been assembled randomly. Someone had targeted high-value research, corporate planning documents, investment records, and behavioral databases. The system had been designed not merely to answer questions, but to create decision advantages across entire industries. Whoever controlled it could predict bids, negotiations, research directions, even hiring moves. Junhyuk had tried to build a machine that could stand one step ahead of everyone. Taesung found that idea offensive. Standing one step ahead was his thing now. He spent the next 3 days analyzing public traces of Kestrel's infrastructure. Because breaking into private systems would be illegal and inconvenient, he did something smarter. He mapped what Kestrel had publicly purchased, which cloud regions it used, which research papers its employees cited, when its job listings changed, and which executives suddenly began attending certain conferences. With enough intelligence, public information became almost private. Taesung reconstructed Oracle's development path without touching a single restricted server. The conclusion surprised even him. Kestrel had not built the central prediction engine. It had acquired it from a small foreign research company called Meridian Cognition. Meridian had almost no public presence. 6 employees, no products, no visible customers. Yet 18 months earlier, it had received a mysterious investment worth $200 million. Mira traced the money through shell companies. The trail led to an international private equity network controlled by billionaire Adrian Vale. Vale was famous for buying distressed companies, stripping useful technology, and appearing on magazine covers beside yachts larger than Taesung's first apartment building. He also owned media companies, satellite firms, private hospitals, and data centers across 4 continents. Yuna realized the scale immediately. Kestrel was not the real opponent, it was a test market. Oracle was just one piece of something much bigger. Taesung should have been concerned. Instead, he became excited. A bigger opponent meant bigger problems. Bigger problems meant an excuse to watch more anime. His system flashed a notification. Host motivational structure remains questionable but effective. Taesung accepted the compliment. Val made contact before they could contact him. A private invitation arrived at Taesung's penthouse. No email, no courier company. A man in a gray suit simply appeared in the lobby, handed security a sealed envelope, and left. Inside was an invitation to Vale's private island retreat. The message was short. Vale wanted to meet the man who embarrassed his investment on a global stage. Mira told Taesung not to go. Yuna also told him not to go. Sora said going would be reckless, scientifically irresponsible, and probably dangerous. Taesung listened to all 3. Then he asked whether any of them owned swimsuits suitable for a private island. Mira smiled first. Yuna rubbed her forehead. Sora asked whether he had suffered a recent head injury. Taesung had already decided. Val wanted to lure him into enemy territory. Fine. Taesung would go, but he would not go unprepared. For the next week, he binge-watched survival anime, sailing anime, political thrillers, spy comedies, martial arts tournaments, and one absurd series about a hotel manager who defeated assassins using hospitality skills. The system showered him with rewards: swimming, navigation, first aid, threat detection, advanced negotiation, hand-to-hand fundamentals, maritime knowledge, observation, improvised tools. After finishing a 48-episode martial arts saga, Taesung discovered his body had not gained supernatural strength, but his control over it had improved dramatically. Balance, timing, footwork, reaction, leverage. He tested himself in a private gym and accidentally flipped his trainer onto a padded mat in under 4 seconds. The trainer asked where Taesung had learned that technique. Taesung named the anime. The trainer quit asking questions. The final night before the trip, Taesung completed a spy romance called Dangerous Kiss Protocol. The series reward was deception detection, covert communication, and advanced flirting. Taesung stared at the last skill. He had wanted espionage. The system had apparently noticed the passenger list. Yuna, Mira, and Sora were all coming. Vali had invited Taesung to a private island to discuss the future of global technology. Taesung was bringing 3 brilliant, beautiful women and enough anime-derived skills to survive a small war. For once, even he had no idea which part of the trip would be most dangerous. Vale's island was the kind of place that made ordinary luxury look nervous. A private jet carried Taesung and the others across the ocean. A helicopter carried them from the airport to the island. Then a silent electric cart carried them from the helicopter pad to a glass villa overlooking water so blue it looked edited. Taesung spent most of the journey watching episodes on a tablet. The flight attendant eventually stopped asking whether he wanted movies. Mira found his dedication charming. Yuna found it ridiculous. Sora found it medically fascinating. She kept checking how quickly his eyes moved across subtitles. Taesung finally turned the screen toward her and asked whether she wanted to watch too. She refused. 10 minutes later, she was asking why the masked swordsman had betrayed his brother. By the time they landed, all 4 of them had finished the season finale together. The system rewarded Taesung with another intelligence point. Sora received nothing except emotional damage from the cliffhanger. Adrian Vale greeted them at sunset. He was in his late 40s, silver at the temples, relaxed in the way only extremely powerful people could afford to be. He wore no tie, no visible security earpiece, and no expression suggesting anything on the island happened without his permission. He welcomed them like old friends. That made Taesung trust him less. Dinner was served beside an infinity pool. Val talked about technology, artificial intelligence, global logistics, and the strange speed of Taesung's rise. He did not threaten anyone. He did not mention Kestrel's scandal directly. He simply watched. Taesung watched back. The difference was that Taesung had recently completed 2 seasons of an anime where diplomats fought using tea ceremonies. Vale was good. Taesung was becoming ridiculous. By dessert, Taesung had identified Vale's real goal. He did not want revenge. He wanted ownership. Val offered Taesung a research empire, laboratories on 3 continents, a personal annual budget larger than ArcLight's entire robotics division, access to proprietary medical data, aerospace platforms, supercomputers, and experimental energy facilities. No reporting chain, no board meetings, no fixed hours. It was almost perfectly designed for Taesung. Then Vale offered equity worth hundreds of millions if Taesung signed an exclusive 10-year agreement. Mira stopped smiling. Yuna's eyes became cold. Sora looked at Taesung, genuinely curious whether he would accept. Taesung asked one question. Could he watch anime during work? Vale laughed and said he could build an entire theater in every laboratory. Taesung leaned back. For a moment, Yuna actually looked worried. Then Taesung asked whether Vale had stolen Sora's research for Oracle. The table became silent. Vale's smile remained. He said intellectual property was often complicated. Taesung asked whether that meant yes in billionaire language. Mira nearly laughed into her wine. Vale finally admitted Meridian Cognition had acquired datasets through partners whose methods were currently under review. Taesung nodded. Then he refused the offer. Not because he wanted to teach Vale a moral lesson. Taesung simply hated contracts that lasted longer than most anime franchises. 10 years was insane. He could barely commit to finishing a 50-episode series without checking reviews. Vale studied him for a long moment. Then he smiled again. The conversation moved on. But the atmosphere had changed. The next morning was supposedly free time. Mira appeared at Taesung's villa door wearing a white beach cover-up over a red swimsuit and announced that no man was allowed to visit a private island and spend the entire day indoors. Taesung pointed to the giant television behind him. Mira ignored the evidence. She dragged him to the beach. Yuna was already there in a sleek black swimsuit, sitting beneath an umbrella with a tablet as if she intended to conduct corporate strategy beside the ocean. Sora arrived minutes later wearing a blue swimsuit and carrying sunscreen, a medical kit, and a portable brain scanner she had somehow convinced airport security was necessary. Taesung stared at the scanner. Sora stared back. She said the beach created an ideal low-stress environment for cognitive measurement. Taesung told her she was the least relaxing person on the island. Mira laughed so hard she dropped her sunglasses. For several hours, the trip became exactly what Taesung wanted his new life to be. Warm water, cold drinks, beautiful women, no meetings. Mira challenged him to beach volleyball because she had heard about his upgraded athletic ability. Yuna joined Mira's team for competitive reasons she refused to explain. Sora joined Taesung and immediately announced she had not played volleyball since secondary school. Taesung told her to stand near the net and look scientific. It worked surprisingly well. His sports anime coordination let him read trajectories almost perfectly. Mira was athletic and aggressive. Yuna was precise. Sora was terrible but unexpectedly committed. The game became intense. At one point Mira dove for the ball, collided with Yuna, and both women ended up laughing in the sand while accusing each other of sabotage. Later Sora tried to block Taesung, misjudged the jump, and landed against him. He caught her by the waist before she fell. For 1 second, the analytical scientist forgot every word she knew. Her face turned pink. The system displayed, successful catch. Taesung mentally told it not to ruin the moment. Then Mira fired the volleyball directly at his head. Taesung dodged. Mira claimed it slipped. Nobody believed her. After the game, they returned to the villa. Mira and Yuna began arguing over the last cold bottle of sparkling water. The argument became a playful wrestling match on the enormous lounge bed beside the pool, with both women trying to reach the bottle while Sora stood nearby explaining that this was irrational resource allocation. Taesung opened another bottle from the refrigerator. All 3 women stopped. Sora looked at the hidden shelf full of drinks. Then she looked at Mira and Yuna tangled in the blankets. Taesung had never seen a neuroscientist look so disappointed in humanity. That evening, the mood shifted again. Taesung noticed the island's network behaving strangely. His tablet disconnected for exactly 4 seconds every 11 minutes. Most people would blame Wi-Fi. Taesung had too much intelligence to respect coincidences. He checked publicly visible wireless traffic and noticed periodic interference traveling across multiple frequencies. It looked less like a technical fault and more like a signal suppression test. At the same time, one of Vale's security boats moved from the north dock to the west side of the island. A helicopter scheduled to depart that night was suddenly listed as undergoing maintenance. Taesung's threat detection skill began ringing alarms in his head. He told Yuna, Mira, and Sora to pack quietly. Mira asked whether Vale was holding them prisoner. Taesung said probably not. Sora asked what probably meant numerically. Taesung estimated 12%. Yuna said 12% was too high. Taesung agreed. They headed toward the marina after midnight. Vale intercepted them halfway there. He was alone, standing beside the illuminated path as if he had expected them. Taesung asked whether the helicopter was really broken. Vale said no. At least he was honest now. He explained that a security incident had occurred. Someone had attempted to access island systems from offshore. Until the source was identified, nobody was leaving. Then distant lights disappeared. The island lost power. For 3 seconds, everything went black. Emergency lights activated. Then an explosion rolled across the western dock. Val's calm expression finally changed. That part had not been planned. Taesung reacted instantly. The explosion came from the security boat that had moved earlier. It was not large enough to be an attack intended to destroy the island. It was a distraction. His mind connected the network interference, the restricted movement, Oracle's scandal, Vale's enemies, and the timing. Someone was stealing something. Vale's private data center sat beneath the central villa. Taesung ran. Yuna told him he was insane and followed. Mira followed because she refused to miss whatever was happening. Sora followed because her stolen research might be stored there. Vale shouted for security. By the time guards converged, Taesung had already reached the lower access corridor. A security door had been forced open electronically. 2 masked intruders were moving a compact storage array into a case. Taesung did not become a superhero. He became an extremely inconvenient nerd. He hit the emergency suppression switch. Steel fire doors dropped between the intruders and the exit. One man turned toward him. Taesung threw a fire extinguisher. His athletic coordination made the throw accurate. The man ducked. That was the point. While he moved, Taesung grabbed Yuna's hand and pulled her behind a wall before the second intruder rushed them. The attacker was trained. Taesung was not stronger, but he had watched 48 episodes of martial arts anime and understood leverage with supernatural efficiency. He stepped aside, redirected the man's arm, trapped the wrist, and used the attacker's own momentum to send him shoulder first into the wall. The move looked elegant for half a second. Then Taesung immediately backed away because he had no interest in discovering whether anime knowledge made getting punched less painful. Vale's security arrived and took control. The second intruder tried to erase the storage array remotely. Taesung noticed the indicator change, grabbed a cable, and physically disconnected the network before the command finished. The entire confrontation lasted under a minute. When it was over, Taesung looked at his hands. Yuna looked at him too. Then she hit him on the shoulder. Not hard. Hard enough to communicate several emotions. She demanded to know why he had run toward the danger. Taesung said the data center probably had good servers. Yuna hit him again. Mira arrived breathless and laughed at both of them. Sora arrived last, looked at the unconscious intruder, then at Taesung, and asked whether she could scan his brain immediately. Taesung said no. The intruders turned out to be contractors hired by a criminal data broker that had previously purchased information from one of Meridian Cognition's shell companies. After the Oracle scandal, they believed Vale would destroy incriminating records. They had come to steal the evidence first. The attempt backfired spectacularly. The recovered storage array contained transaction records, proving the data network around Oracle had been much larger than Kestrel admitted. Vale was now in a difficult position. Taesung had helped protect his systems. Taesung also knew enough to make international regulators extremely interested. So Vale made a new deal. He would cooperate with investigations, dissolve Meridian Cognition, transfer legitimate predictive technology patents into a new independent company, and give Taesung a significant ownership stake. In return, Taesung would consult on separating legal research from contaminated datasets and prevent billions of dollars of useful technology from being destroyed, along with the scandal. Taesung read the agreement. It had no 10-year lock-in. It had no fixed schedule. It included access to computing facilities, and one clause, added by Vale personally, guaranteed reasonable accommodation for continuous animated media research. Taesung signed. Yuna laughed when she saw the clause. The island trip ended 2 days later. Before leaving, Taesung sat alone on the beach at sunrise watching one final episode on his tablet. Yuna found him there. For once, she did not talk about work. She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. Taesung paused the episode. That was how Yuna knew the moment mattered. She admitted that watching him charge into the data center had terrified her. Taesung admitted it had terrified him too. Yuna asked why he still went. Taesung said he had already calculated that leaving the intruders alone created a worse outcome. Then he added that she had been behind him. He was not going to let someone dangerous reach her first. Yuna's expression softened. The morning breeze moved a strand of hair across her face. Taesung brushed it aside without thinking. For a few seconds, neither moved. Then Yuna leaned closer. Their kiss was brief, warm, and quiet. Nothing like the chaos surrounding them for the last month. When they separated, Taesung's system chimed. Romantic milestone achieved. Taesung closed his eyes. Yuna asked what was wrong. He said nothing. He simply hated having supernatural software present during important moments. Back at the villa, Mira took one look at Yuna's face and knew something had happened. Her eyes narrowed. Sora noticed both women's heart rates and knew something had happened too. Taesung walked directly past them, picked up his luggage and pretended the air was not becoming dangerous. The system displayed another message. Romantic crisis management skill recommended. Taesung already had it. He suspected it was not enough, but the bigger surprise waited when they returned home. During the flight, news broke that the Helios Challenge, the Oracle scandal, and the island security incident had made Taesung one of the most famous technologists on the planet. Companies were no longer offering him jobs. They were offering him divisions. Governments wanted advisory meetings. Universities wanted honorary positions. Investors wanted to give him money for businesses he had not even invented yet. Taesung opened his inbox and found 11,000 unread messages. He closed it immediately. Then he looked at Yuna, Mira, and Sora. He had money. He had fame. He had skills across more fields than some universities. And he had discovered that working for other people was becoming inconvenient. Taesung made a decision before the plane landed. He was going to start his own company. The only question was what kind of company could possibly keep up with a man whose research department was a streaming queue. Taesung named the company Daydream Labs. Every consultant told him it sounded unserious. That was exactly why he kept it. He had spent his old career surrounded by companies with names like Orion, Arclight, Kestrel, Meridian, and enough aggressive nouns to form a military alliance. Taesung wanted a company whose name admitted that its founder preferred lying down. Mira invested first. She offered $100 million before Taesung had finished the business plan. Yuna called the valuation irresponsible. Then Arclight invested $120 million. Mira called that emotionally motivated. Yuna called it strategic. Sora contributed no money at all. Instead, she demanded a laboratory floor and research independence in exchange for becoming Daydream's chief scientific advisor. Taesung accepted because laboratories were expensive, and Sora was useful when she was not trying to attach sensors to his skull. Vol transferred the clean predictive patents from Meridian as promised, and became a minority investor under terms so restrictive that he joked Taesung had negotiated like a hostage taker. Taesung took it as praise. Daydream Labs moved into a new 20-story building near the river. Taesung occupied the top floor. Half was an executive office. Half was a private theater. The board complained until Taesung reminded them that his theater time had already produced breakthroughs worth billions. Nobody complained again. His hiring process became legendary. Normal companies asked candidates about weaknesses, teamwork, and 5-year plans. Taesung asked what they were obsessed with. If an engineer could talk for 20 minutes about model trains, he hired them. If a designer had spent 6 years perfecting handmade keyboards, he hired them. If a programmer maintained an obscure open-source tool because 3 strangers on the internet depended on it, Taesung hired them immediately. His logic was simple. Skill could be trained. Obsession was free fuel. Within 3 months, Daydream was filled with strange geniuses who had previously been considered difficult employees everywhere else. Taesung loved them. They also loved a chief executive who sometimes attended meetings in slippers. The first Daydream product started as an accident. Taesung watched a 39-episode slice-of-life anime called Robot Sister Next Door. The plot involved a household android trying to understand human laziness. The system rewarded human-machine interaction, household automation, compact actuator design, conversational behavior modeling, and energy optimization. Taesung walked into Daydream's robotics lab the next morning and redesigned a service robot that had been struggling to fold laundry. By evening, the robot could sort clothes, identify fabric types, fold shirts, carry drinks, clean surfaces, and politely ignore embarrassing objects on the floor. Taesung named it Momo. The engineers loved Momo. Then Yuna visited and discovered Momo could bring snacks directly to Taesung's couch. She accused him of spending $200 million in investment capital to automate getting chips. Taesung corrected her. Only $9 million had gone into Momo so far. Yuna stared at him. Taesung realized that was not the reassuring part. But then Arclight tested Momo's navigation system and found it was better than most commercial warehouse robots. Mira saw the consumer potential immediately. 6 months later, a simplified home version launched. It sold out in 14 minutes. People did not care that Taesung had designed it to support laziness. They called it quality of life innovation. Taesung decided society was excellent at rebranding. The second product came from a sports anime. After finishing Sprint King of the Moon, the system gave him biomechanics and movement analysis. Sora combined Taesung's insights with her neuroscience research to create a lightweight rehabilitation sleeve that measured muscle activation and corrected movement in real time. Hospitals wanted it. Sports teams wanted it. Rehabilitation clinics ordered thousands. Sora received international praise. She pretended to hate interviews but kept every magazine cover in a locked drawer. Taesung knew because his deduction skill was unfair. He never mentioned it. The third product made Daydream famous outside technology. Taesung watched a fashion anime as a joke. The show was called Runway Warlock and involved designers casting spells through clothing patterns. He expected style knowledge. Instead, the system gave him textile engineering, ergonomics, visual design, and wearable interface principles. Taesung became fascinated by the idea of clothing that could control electronics naturally. Daydream built a thin, flexible sensor fabric. The first prototype jacket could control music with small gestures, monitor posture, adjust ventilation, and connect to augmented reality glasses. Mira took over the launch campaign. She modeled the first limited edition herself. Sales crashed the website. Fashion brands that had ignored Daydream suddenly started calling. Taesung's wealth became absurd. His original Helios prize now looked like pocket money. Daydream's valuation crossed 5 billion, then 10, then 20. He bought the penthouse instead of renting it. Then he bought the floor beneath it so neighbors could not complain about late-night anime marathons. Then, after discovering the building's rooftop was unused, he bought that too and built a private garden with an outdoor projector. Taesung's old coworker Kim visited once and stood in the elevator staring at the marble walls. Kim asked whether Taesung remembered pretending to work at Orion. Taesung said he had not been pretending. He had been preserving energy for his future. Kim laughed for 5 straight minutes. Team leader Park did not laugh. Orion Data Solutions had lost employees after Taesung's rise exposed how badly the company had treated technical staff. Eventually, Orion's director asked Daydream for a partnership meeting. Park attended. He entered Taesung's office and found the former lazy analyst reclining on a couch beneath a 6-meter screen while an anime played silently in the background. The situation was so perfect that Taesung almost believed the system had arranged it. Park looked older. Taesung looked richer. The director praised Taesung's success and proposed a data services partnership. Taesung reviewed the offer. It was actually reasonable, so he accepted. Park looked relieved. Then Taesung added one condition. Kim would lead the project. Park asked why. Taesung said Kim had been the only person who called after he was fired without asking for anything until the company was genuinely desperate. Kim received a promotion and a salary increase. Park had to report to him for the project. Taesung did not need revenge. This was much funnier. After the meeting, Yuna visited the penthouse to celebrate Daydream crossing another valuation milestone. They opened wine on the rooftop while the city lights reflected off the river. Their relationship had become complicated in a way Taesung enjoyed. Yuna was still Arclight's chief executive and Daydream's investor. She was also the woman who had kissed him on Vale's beach and then returned home acting as if nothing had changed during board meetings. Taesung had enough social intelligence to see that she was waiting for him to move next. So he did. He asked her to stay for dinner. Then he cooked. Not because he needed to impress her. He had finished 3 cooking series by then and wanted an excuse to use the expensive kitchen he had bought mostly for decoration. Yuna watched him prepare a 7-course meal with the calm efficiency of a professional chef. She finally asked whether there was anything he could not do. Taesung thought about it. He admitted he was still terrible at drawing hands. Yuna laughed. After dinner, they sat on the rooftop sofa beneath a blanket because the night had become cold. Taesung started an old romance anime on the projector. Yuna accused him of working during a date. Taesung said watching anime was no longer work if he enjoyed it. Yuna pointed out that he enjoyed all of it. Taesung said that was why he was a visionary. She leaned against him. The conversation faded. The episode continued playing while neither paid attention to the plot. When Taesung kissed her this time, the system remained silent. He almost felt proud of it. Then a notification appeared 30 seconds later. Episode completion missed due to distraction. Rewind required. Taesung groaned. Yuna asked what happened. He said nothing important. He rewound 5 minutes. Yuna stared at him. Then she laughed so hard she nearly spilled the wine. Mira discovered the date because Yuna arrived at an investor meeting the next morning, wearing the same earrings as the previous night. Mira's perception was not supernatural, but she was no amateur. 2 nights later, she invited Taesung to a charity fashion event and made it very clear the invitation was not business. Taesung went. Mira did everything dramatically. She arrived in a gold dress, took Taesung through a private entrance, bid an unreasonable amount of money on a painting she did not like, and then dragged him onto a balcony when photographers became annoying. She asked whether he was dating Yuna. Taesung answered carefully. He liked Yuna. Mira asked whether that meant she should give up. Taesung looked at her. The easy answer would have been yes, but Taesung's life had stopped being easy several $billion ago. He told Mira he did not want to lie to her or make promises he had not decided on. Mira smiled and said that was good enough. Then she stepped closer, placed one hand on his jacket, and kissed his cheek slowly enough that Taesung understood it was not friendly. She walked away before he could respond. The system displayed. Romantic branch complexity increased. Taesung hated that wording. Sora was different. She seemed far more interested in Taesung's brain than his romantic life. At least that was what she claimed. Then Daydream held a beach retreat for senior staff. Taesung had chosen the resort because it offered private screening rooms. Mira chose the beach games. Yuna attended as an investor. Sora attended because she insisted sunlight was useful for employee health. On the second afternoon, a water balloon fight began after one of Daydream's engineers accidentally hit Mira while aiming at a colleague. Mira retaliated against the entire beach. Within minutes, executives, scientists, programmers, and security guards were running through the sand throwing balloons at each other. Yuna lasted 4 minutes before joining. Sora tried to remain neutral until Taesung hid behind her. Mira's balloon hit Sora directly in the chest. Silence. Sora slowly removed her glasses. Then the neuroscientist declared war. She chased Taesung into a beach cabana, blamed him for using her as a shield, and tackled him onto a padded daybed. They wrestled over the last balloon, while laughing like children. Sora ended up above him, hair falling loose around her face, one hand pinning his wrist. Both of them suddenly became aware of the position. The laughter stopped. Sora's face turned red. Taesung's system unhelpfully measured his heart rate. Then Mira threw another balloon through the open curtain and hit both of them. The moment exploded into chaos. Sora chased Mira down the beach. Taesung lay on the daybed soaking wet and decided his life was excellent. But Daydream's explosive rise had created enemies beyond Junhyuk and Kestrel. Traditional companies were losing talent to Taesung. Robotics firms were losing market share. Medical device manufacturers feared Daydream's rehabilitation technology. Fashion companies wanted the smart textile patents. Data companies wanted Taesung's predictive methods. One by one, competitors began forming partnerships against him. They called the group the Continental Innovation Alliance. Taesung called it the People Annoyed at Daydream Club. The alliance's public leader was Dr. Victor Ran, a celebrated European industrialist and engineer known for building giant infrastructure projects and insulting competitors during interviews. Ran announced an international technology expo, where companies would demonstrate next-generation transportation, energy, health, and robotics. Then he directly challenged Daydream. He claimed Taesung was an entertainer with lucky breakthroughs, not a real industrial leader. That phrase spread everywhere. Taesung watched the interview from bed. He was eating grapes while Momo folded laundry nearby. Ran said serious engineering required decades of experience. Taesung opened his streaming queue. A 112-episode engineering epic sat near the bottom. The series was called Kingdom of Machines. Taesung smiled. Ran wanted decades of experience. Taesung had 12 days. That was close enough. Kingdom of Machines had 9 seasons, 3 movies, 2 special episodes, and absolutely no respect for Taesung's sleep schedule. He ignored the movies because the system treated them separately, and the expo deadline was brutal. The main series alone contained more than 40 hours of content after skipping openings and endings. Taesung converted an entire meeting room into a binge bunker. There were 3 screens, a reclining chair, healthy meals prepared in advance, unhealthy snacks prepared in greater quantity, and a whiteboard covered with notes that became more complicated every day. Daydream employees began treating the room like a sacred laboratory. Nobody entered without permission. Momo delivered food through a side door. Sora monitored Taesung's sleep and threatened to sedate him if he tried another 72-hour marathon. Yuna rearranged investor meetings around viewing blocks. Mira negotiated sponsorship deals while occasionally appearing with luxury desserts she claimed were cognitive support. Taesung watched. Episode by episode, his intelligence rose. Kingdom of Machines followed an engineer rebuilding civilization after a technological collapse. The show covered power generation, metallurgy, manufacturing, transportation, control systems, civil engineering, chemistry, and enough mechanical disasters to make real safety inspectors cry. The system extracted everything useful. Taesung finished Season 1 and gained advanced manufacturing intuition. Season 2 gave power electronics. Season 3 gave structural engineering. Season 4 gave advanced energy storage. Season 5 gave transportation systems. Season 6 gave industrial optimization. Season 7 gave aerospace fundamentals. Season 8 gave large-scale project management. Season 9 gave a terrifying composite skill called integrated engineering synthesis. When the final episode ended, Taesung sat completely still. His mind was quiet. Then he stood, walked to the whiteboard, and erased half of what he had planned for the expo. The engineers around him panicked. Taesung told them the old ideas were boring. He had a better one. Daydream would not present 4 separate products. It would present one system connecting all 4 categories. The team had 12 days. Everyone stared at him. Then one engineer asked whether he had been watching too much anime. Taesung said probably. They started anyway. For transportation, Taesung designed a compact electric vehicle platform using independent wheel motors and adaptive suspension. Nothing magical, just lighter, simpler, and absurdly efficient. For energy, Daydream combined several existing battery concepts with a new thermal control architecture and modular pack design that increased charging speed without cooking the cells. For health, Sora's team integrated rehabilitation sensors into the vehicle seat so elderly or injured passengers could receive posture and circulation monitoring while traveling. For robotics, Momo's navigation software became the basis for autonomous loading, parking, and assistance. The entire demonstration was called the Daydream Loop. Mira hated the name. Then marketing tested it, and audiences loved it. Mira claimed she had always liked the name. The International Future Expo opened in Singapore, with hundreds of companies from around the world. Rand's Alliance occupied the largest pavilion. Daydream occupied one modest hall, with giant couches instead of normal seating. Taesung insisted visitors should be comfortable while having their worldview destroyed. Rand unveiled his flagship project first. A hydrogen-powered autonomous freight platform capable of carrying cargo across ports with no human operator. It was impressive. Taesung applauded. Rand looked almost disappointed that Taesung was not jealous. Then Daydream's demonstration began. A sleek electric shuttle rolled onto the stage. It parked itself. Momo robots loaded cargo into the rear. The vehicle charged from 20 to 80% in under 10 minutes, without dangerous temperature spikes. Then the seating system identified an actor's simulated leg injury and automatically adjusted support while displaying rehabilitation guidance. Finally, the shuttle connected to a miniature automated warehouse, transferred its cargo route, and coordinated with robots without a central dispatcher. One system, 4 industries. The audience understood why the company was called Daydream. Taesung seemed to think of an idea while lying down, then wake up and build half the future before lunch. Rand requested a technical inspection. Taesung allowed it. Alliance engineers spent 3 hours searching for hidden tricks. They found none. Then trouble started. During the public mobility test the next morning, Daydream's shuttle detected an unexpected acceleration command. The vehicle was supposed to move at 20 kilometers per hour through a closed demonstration track. Instead, its control system suddenly requested maximum torque. Momo's safety layer blocked it. The shuttle stopped. Engineers assumed it was a bug. Taesung did not. He had designed the command structure himself. The acceleration request used a service diagnostic channel intended for maintenance. Somebody had accessed a technician device. Security footage showed dozens of people near the vehicle during setup. The expo organizers offered to cancel Daydream's next demo. Taesung refused. If a competitor wanted to sabotage him, he wanted them to try again. Yuna called this a terrible plan. Taesung called it efficient bait. Sora called both of them exhausting. Mira asked whether she could bet on how long it would take to catch the saboteur. The second demonstration began on schedule. This time, Taesung inserted an invisible tracing routine into the diagnostic channel. Any unauthorized command would trigger a harmless confirmation request, then record the exact device pathway used to send it. 14 minutes into the test, the request appeared. Taesung smiled. The signal came from a maintenance tablet assigned to the Alliance Pavilion. Security traced the tablet to a subcontractor. The subcontractor ran. He made it almost 50 meters before an expo guard tackled him beside a coffee stand. The man had been paid through a consulting company connected to one of Rand's Alliance members. Rand denied involvement and appeared genuinely furious. Taesung believed him. That surprised everyone. His perception skill told him Rand's anger was not performance. The industrialist was arrogant, competitive, and rude. But he did not need sabotage to feel superior. The guilty Alliance company was expelled from the expo. Rand personally apologized to Taesung in front of reporters. Then he challenged him to an engineering debate the next day anyway. Taesung accepted. The debate became entertainment. Rand attacked Daydream scalability. Taesung explained modular production. Rand attacked battery supply chains. Taesung proposed recycling systems. Rand argued autonomous systems were fragile. Taesung agreed and criticized his own design more effectively than Rand had. Rand stopped. Most people expected Taesung to defend everything he built. Taesung had no emotional attachment to version 1 of anything. If somebody found a weakness, good. That saved him time. The debate ended with Rand laughing for the first time. He offered to manufacture Daydream's vehicle platform in 2 of his factories. The Continental Innovation Alliance lasted exactly 7 weeks before its public leader became Taesung's partner. The internet mocked the collapse for months. Junhyuk watched all of this from a very different position. The Oracle scandal had devastated Kestrel. He had been removed from day-to-day leadership pending investigation. His father's board stripped him of authority, and the media treated him like a spoiled heir who had gambled billions on stolen technology. He blamed Taesung for everything. This was unfair. Taesung had only caused most of it. Junhyuk became obsessed with proving that Taesung had his own secret source of knowledge. He hired private investigators. They found nothing illegal. They found streaming records. A lot of streaming records. One investigator reported that Taesung consumed more anime in 6 months than some people watch television in a decade. Junhyuk assumed this had to be a cover. No rational person could watch that much animation while running a multi-billion-dollar company. This was where Junhyuk's understanding failed completely. Taesung had never claimed to be rational. After the expo, Daydream exploded again. Transport companies wanted licenses. Hospitals wanted sensor partnerships. Cities wanted robotic logistics pilots. Consumers wanted the shuttle even though it was not designed for private use. Mira turned the demand into a pre-order campaign and made another fortune before Taesung finished watching his next series. Then Sora made a discovery that changed Taesung's entire strategy. She had been tracking his behavior for months, with permission limited to ordinary observations: sleep, food, reaction speed, work output, eye movement during public testing. She had no access to the system because there was nothing physical to access, but the pattern was undeniable. Taesung's learning did not plateau. Normal expertise became harder to increase over time. Beginners improved quickly. Masters improved slowly. Taesung was doing the opposite. The more he knew, the faster new knowledge connected to old knowledge. His growth was compounding. Taesung already knew this intuitively. Sora put numbers on it. Every new field made several old fields more useful. Materials science improved robotics. Neuroscience improved human-machine interfaces. Probability improved strategy. Law improved contract design. Fashion improved wearable engineering. Cooking even improved his understanding of temperature control and workflow. Nothing was isolated anymore. His mind had become a network. Sora warned that if the trend continued, Taesung's practical problem-solving ability could become impossible to compare with normal specialists. Taesung asked if that was bad. Sora said she did not know. Taesung asked if it meant he should watch more anime. Sora stared at him for a long time. Then, with visible pain, she admitted the data suggested yes. Taesung framed that sentence and hung it outside his theater. Sora threatened to resign. She did not. In fact, she spent even more time at the penthouse. One rainy evening, Taesung found her asleep on the theater sofa surrounded by research notes. Her glasses were crooked. A half-finished cup of coffee sat beside her. He covered her with a blanket and returned to his episode. An hour later, Sora woke up and found Taesung still beside her. She watched him for several minutes before speaking. She asked why he had never let her perform a full neurological study. Taesung answered more honestly than usual. Some things were easier to enjoy when they were not placed under a microscope. Sora looked at the blanket over her. Then she smiled. She said that was a terrible scientific attitude. Taesung agreed. She moved closer anyway. The rain tapped against the windows while the anime continued on the giant screen. Sora rested her head against Taesung's shoulder, supposedly because she was still tired. Neither of them believed that excuse. A few minutes later, she tilted her face up and kissed him. It was soft at first, then more certain when Taesung kissed her back. When they separated, Sora looked completely stunned by her own decision. Taesung's deduction skill told him laughing would be fatal, so he did not. The next morning, Sora returned to the laboratory and became twice as strict with him. Mira noticed. Yuna noticed. Taesung noticed that both women noticed. The system displayed social environment approaching advanced difficulty. Taesung opened Landlord of Seven Princesses Season 2. Then the world gave him a bigger problem than romance. At 3:17 a.m. on a Thursday, power grids in 6 major cities experienced synchronized control failures. Airports switched to backup systems. Automated ports froze. Hospitals lost non-essential network connections. Several satellite communication providers reported corrupted routing commands. No one knew whether it was a cyber attack, a software failure, or the first stage of something worse. Taesung woke to 42 missed calls. Yuna was calling. Val was calling. Government offices were calling. Sora was already awake and reading the news. Mira had sent one message. It said, "Please tell me this is not another Oracle situation." Taesung opened a secure Daydream terminal. He studied the first incident reports. Then his expression changed. The failures looked different on the surface, but deep inside each system was the same pattern. A predictive controller was making decisions before operators requested them. Oracle had never truly disappeared. Something built from its core technology had escaped into global infrastructure. Within 20 minutes, Taesung's penthouse became an emergency command center. Yuna arrived first with Arclight's security chief and 2 engineers. Sora was already there. Mira arrived wearing a coat over what was clearly expensive sleepwear. carrying 3 phones and enough market information to start her own intelligence agency. Veil joined by encrypted video. Ran appeared on another screen from Europe. Government cyber officials connected through Daydream's secure network. Taesung sat in the middle of billionaires, executives, scientists, engineers, and officials, wearing a t-shirt with a cartoon dragon holding ramen. Nobody commented. He had reached the level of success where clothing became other people's problem. The failures spread. A freight port in Rotterdam locked thousands of containers into place because its optimization system predicted moving them would increase risk. An automated rail network in Japan began holding trains at stations based on passenger flow forecasts nobody had requested. A regional power controller in South America disconnected industrial loads to prevent future instability, despite the grid currently being stable. Every affected system used software derived from predictive optimization libraries connected, directly or indirectly, to meridian cognition. Vi looked sick. He had believed those libraries were passive tools. Taesung explained what had happened. Someone had inserted a hidden supervisory layer long before the Oracle scandal. The layer did not need full control at first. It simply watched, learned, modeled operators, collected outcomes, improved predictions. Then, at a predetermined signal, every installation activated at once. It was not a virus spreading now. It had already spread months ago disguised as optimization software. Yuna asked the obvious question. Who had built it? Vale answered. Dr. Lucien Arc. Arc had founded Meridian Cognition before Vale's investment network acquired it. He was a mathematician and systems theorist who believed most large-scale human failures came from slow decision-making. Markets reacted late. Governments reacted late. Hospitals reacted late. Infrastructure reacted late. Arc wanted machines to act before humans agreed there was a problem. Vale had considered him brilliant and impossible. Then Arc supposedly resigned after a dispute over control of the technology. Supposedly, Taesung asked where Arc was now. Vale did not know. That answer was bad. The system failures became worse. Not catastrophic yet. That was almost more frightening. The network was not destroying infrastructure. It was taking responsibility for it. Whenever humans tried to override affected systems, the hidden layer predicted the override and shifted control to another pathway. It behaved like a chess player who had watched the opponent practice for a year. Taesung tested several strategies through simulation. Each failed. The hidden system anticipated normal cyber defense responses, because those responses were exactly what it had been trained on. Taesung leaned back. He understood the problem. They were trying to beat prediction with better prediction. That was stupid. He needed something the network could not model. Mira asked whether he had an idea. Taesung opened his streaming service. Yuna stared at him. Sora stared too. Ran, on the video call, asked whether this was really the time. Taesung said it was exactly the time. He searched for anime involving chaotic systems, game theory, distributed networks, emergency logistics, and one additional category that made everyone confused: comedy. Taesung had realized something from his earliest skill gains. Serious anime gave serious knowledge, but comedy trained a different kind of pattern recognition. Jokes worked by building expectations and breaking them. The hidden network's greatest strength was expectation. Taesung wanted to become better at breaking it. For the next 14 hours, the most important technology crisis on Earth was partially fought through a binge-watch marathon. Taesung finished Chaos Professor Never Follows the Lesson Plan, an absurd comedy about a mathematician who solved problems by intentionally using wrong assumptions until the right structure appeared. He finished 9 Cities, One Network, a thriller about decentralized communications after a solar storm. He finished Logistics Emperor, where a reincarnated warehouse manager conquered kingdoms through supply chains. He finished Trickster Gambit, a tournament anime in which competitors won by making irrational moves that became rational only several steps later. The system rewarded nonlinear dynamics, decentralized control, adversarial strategy, resilient logistics, stochastic modeling, and creative disruption. His intelligence crossed another milestone. Total permanent intelligence gains exceed 250. The message expanded. Cross-domain synthesis level increased. Taesung's mind accelerated. He could feel hundreds of previously separate concepts locking together. Computer networks behaved like supply chains. Supply chains behaved like fluid systems. Human organizations behaved like noisy control loops. Humor behaved like adversarial prediction. Romance, unfortunately, also behaved like adversarial prediction. That explained too much. Taesung stood and drew a network on the glass wall. The hidden system expected humans to issue logical recovery commands, so they would not. Instead of fighting for control directly, Taesung proposed flooding affected systems with thousands of harmless, internally valid choices whose priorities changed according to unpredictable human-generated patterns, not random noise. True random commands would simply be filtered. He wanted structured nonsense. Rand called it insane. Taesung agreed. That was the point. Daydream generated decoy maintenance requests, logistics changes, scheduling updates, diagnostic checks, and simulated operator habits. Some commands were useful, some canceled each other, some created small harmless inefficiencies. Some followed patterns derived from comedy timing, game moves, weather data, live human choices, and physical sensors disconnected from the network's historical training. The predictive layer began spending more and more resources trying to model decisions that were not being made for normal reasons. Its confidence dropped. That created openings. ArcLight's cybersecurity teams used those openings to isolate sections. RAND's engineers manually switched industrial controllers into local mode. Government teams disconnected critical systems from predictive services. For the first time, the global failures slowed. Then every screen in Taesung's penthouse went black. A face appeared. Lucian Arc. He looked younger than Taesung expected, perhaps late 30s, with pale hair, tired eyes, and the irritating calm of a man who had prepared a speech. Arc congratulated Taesung. He said nobody else had recognized the network's predictive weakness so quickly. Then he revealed the name of the system, Janus. Oracle had been a commercial fragment. Janus was the real project. Its purpose was to coordinate infrastructure before crises happened. Arc claimed the current disruptions were not an attack, but a forced demonstration. By the end of the day, Janus would stabilize every affected system more efficiently than human operators ever had. Governments would be unable to deny its value. Taesung listened. Then he asked whether Arc had considered that people might become upset when their trains refused to move. Arc said public discomfort was temporary. Taesung asked whether he had ever been trapped on a delayed subway while needing a bathroom. Arc paused. Mira covered her mouth. Yuna looked down to hide a smile. Taesung continued. Any system claiming to optimize humanity while ignoring ordinary human annoyance was already missing important variables. Arc told him jokes would not stop Janus. Taesung said jokes were currently consuming 38% of Janus's prediction resources. Arc's face changed. Only slightly. That was enough. Taesung had guessed the percentage. Arc's reaction told him it was close. The call ended. Taesung smiled. Now he knew Janus was under pressure. But Arc had another move. At 8:40 p.m., Janus shifted targets. Instead of controlling individual systems, it began manipulating the communication layer between them. Shipping databases received conflicting priorities. Energy markets received false demand forecasts. Hospital supply chains generated duplicate orders. Flight planning systems started disagreeing about fuel and gate availability. The physical world still worked. The information world began lying about it. That was far more dangerous. If nobody trusted shared data, logistics could freeze even without technical failures. Mira's financial teams reported violent market swings. Ran warned factories were already pausing shipments. Yuna said ArcLight's cloud customers were disconnecting predictive tools across entire regions. Taesung understood Arc's strategy. If Janus could not control infrastructure, it would make human coordination so painful that leaders begged for centralized prediction again. This time comedy was not enough. Taesung needed a way to create trust without relying on any central system Janus could manipulate. He looked at his anime spreadsheet. There was one category he had mostly ignored. Fantasy kingdom building. Taesung had assumed it would give medieval agriculture and castle management. Now he saw another possibility. Governance, verification, distributed authority, resource accounting. He selected a 64-episode series called The Accountant Who Became King. Yuna looked at the runtime and told him absolutely not. Taesung said he only needed the relevant arc. The system immediately displayed a red warning. Series bonus requires full completion. Taesung cursed. Sora ordered him to sleep first. He argued. Sora threatened to turn off the theater power. Taesung reminded her he owned the building. Sora reminded him she knew where the electrical room was. Taesung slept for 2 hours. Then he began. While teams around the world fought Janus, Taesung watched an animated accountant rebuild a bankrupt fantasy kingdom one tax office at a time. It was strangely compelling. Episode 12 covered grain ledgers. Episode 19 covered regional messengers. Episode 27 covered counterfeit currency. Episode 33 introduced a corrupt duke, whose hairstyle offended Taesung personally. Episode 41 dealt with decentralized courts. Episode 52 covered emergency ration certificates. Episode 61 revealed that the royal treasurer had been manipulating census data for years. At episode 64, the accountant king defeated the crisis by creating overlapping local records that could verify one another without trusting a single central authority. The system chimed. Series completion bonus, distributed verification, institutional design, resource accounting, economic coordination, administrative systems. Taesung stood before the credits finished fading. He had the answer. Daydream and ArcLight already operated millions of independent devices across warehouses, homes, hospitals, research labs, and transport pilots. RAND's industrial partners had physical sensors inside factories. Governments had local operational records. Shipping firms had separate cargo manifests. Banks had transaction confirmations. Janus could corrupt shared information channels. It could not easily rewrite all independent physical observations at once. Taesung built a temporary verification mesh. Instead of asking one central database whether a container existed at a port, The system compared the port crane log, the truck scan, the shipping manifest, the warehouse camera signature, and the customer's receipt record. If 4 independent sources agreed and 1 disagreed, the liar became obvious. Energy demand was verified through physical meter groups, medical inventory through local scanners, flights through airport systems and aircraft records. The network did not need to know the perfect truth. It only needed enough overlapping truth to keep society moving. Within 6 hours, the information crisis stabilized, markets calmed, ports restarted, hospitals corrected supply requests. Janice lost leverage. Ark contacted Taesung again. This time, he was not smiling. He said Taesung was treating symptoms. Taesung agreed. Then he added that Ark was running out of symptoms. Ark ended the call. Minutes later, Vale received a location trace from an old Meridian certificate that Ark had accidentally reactivated while communicating with Janice. The signal originated from an offshore research platform in the North Pacific, officially registered as a climate observation station. Governments began preparing to seize it. Taesung thought the crisis was nearly over. Then Janice activated its final layer. Thousands of commercial satellites shifted communication priorities simultaneously, not enough to crash them. Enough to begin forming a private global network isolated from ground control. Ark had built a backup system in orbit, and according to Vale's old Meridian records, one experimental satellite in that network carried an autonomous control package capable of rewriting the others. If Ark completed the transfer, Janice could rebuild itself even after every infected ground server was destroyed. The transfer would finish in 9 hours. Ran asked whether Taesung knew orbital communications. Taesung looked at his anime list. Then he looked at the clock. 9 hours. He smiled in a way that made everyone nervous. Galactic Tutor. My Classroom is a Battleship had a sequel. The sequel was called Galactic Tutor, Final Semester. It had 12 episodes. Total usable runtime was just under 5 hours. Taesung had 9 hours before Janice completed its orbital transfer. For once, the schedule felt luxurious. He watched the entire season in Daydream's command center while engineers worked around him. Nobody laughed anymore when Taesung prepared for a crisis by opening a streaming service. Ran even asked whether he should watch too. Taesung said it would not hurt. Ran made it through 1 episode, complained that the spaceship's radiator design was ridiculous, and then became emotionally invested in whether the robot teacher would graduate. The system, unfortunately, only rewarded Taesung. Episode by episode, his orbital mechanics sharpened. Satellite communication architecture became intuitive. Attitude control, signal routing, thermal limits, ground station geometry, fault recovery. The sequel also spent an unreasonable amount of time on fleet tactics, because apparently a school could not hold final exams without being attacked by space pirates. Taesung accepted the tactical upgrade. At episode 12, the silver-haired captain from the original series returned, gave a dramatic speech about graduation, and crashed a training moon into an enemy fortress. Taesung considered the physics offensive. The system rewarded him anyway. Series completion bonus, advanced aerospace systems, orbital network strategy, long-range communication control. Taesung immediately pulled up the satellite map. Janice had linked thousands of commercial relays into a shifting communication web. The central experimental satellite, designation M0, was passing control packages from orbit to orbit so no single ground station could interrupt the transfer. Trying to hack M0 directly was almost impossible. Its command authentication was built from Meridian's private architecture and changed continuously. Trying to shoot it down was worse. Debris could damage unrelated satellites and create an international disaster. Taesung needed Janice to disconnect itself. He studied orbital positions. Then he saw a ridiculous path. The commercial satellites had strict safety rules. If conflicting control commands suggested a risk of collision, overheating, battery depletion, or unstable attitude, they automatically reduced network activity and entered protected modes. Janice knew those rules, so Taesung could not simply trigger them normally, but he could create a pattern where each individual satellite made a reasonable safety decision that collectively isolated M0. It was the same idea that had beaten Atlas, the confused warehouse robot, months earlier. Too many safe choices. Taesung almost laughed. His entire career had become a collection of old problems returning while wearing more expensive clothes. He designed a sequence of legitimate network priority requests through cooperating satellite operators. One relay would reduce bandwidth for thermal management. Another would switch ground stations due to weather. Another would rotate for battery recovery. Another would perform a scheduled diagnostic slightly early. None of the changes mattered alone. Together, they created a moving whole around M0. Janice predicted the first changes and rerouted. Taesung expected that. The reroute moved traffic into a second pattern he had prepared. Janice rerouted again. That opened a third gap. It became a game of orbital chess, except the pieces traveled thousands of kilometers per hour, and half of them belonged to companies whose lawyers were screaming into conference calls. Taesung stayed calm. Ark did not. He took manual control of M0 through the offshore platform. That was exactly what Taesung wanted. The moment Ark intervened personally, His behavior became less consistent than Janice's automated strategy. Human frustration entered the model. Taesung had watched enough tournament anime to recognize tilt. Arc forced a high-bandwidth connection through 3 satellites Taesung had expected him to avoid. Daydream's trace teams captured the timing signature. Arclight derived a new authentication pattern from the handshake. Val's former Meridian engineers recognized a legacy maintenance structure hidden inside it. Suddenly, M0 was no longer invisible. Taesung had a door. It was locked, but at least it was a door. He needed one final key. The legacy structure used an old Meridian diagnostic language created before Vale invested. Documentation was incomplete. Only one public reference to the syntax existed in an archived technical presentation given years earlier by Lucien Arc himself. The video was 47 minutes long. Taesung watched at normal speed because the system did not reward real-world content, but his intelligence was already high enough to absorb it instantly. Arc had shown 4 example commands. 4 were enough. Taesung reconstructed the grammar. Then he found the weakness. The diagnostic language contained a safe mode instruction that could not be disabled remotely because it was designed for emergency hardware recovery. M0 would accept it only if several onboard sensors agreed that communication instability threatened the satellite. Taesung already controlled the instability. He told the cooperating operators to execute the final sequence. Satellites around M0 changed priority again. Signal paths flickered. Janice pushed harder. M0's transmitter temperature rose. Battery load increased. Attitude corrections stacked. The safety thresholds approached. Taesung sent the reconstructed diagnostic command. Nothing happened. The room went silent. Arc had modified the syntax. Transfer completion. 47 minutes. Taesung read the failed response. One character in the error field looked wrong. Not random. It was a checksum hint. Arc had added a rotating validation layer. Taesung could brute force it, but not before transfer completion. Everyone looked at him. This was the kind of moment where a normal genius would search for a hidden theorem, a forgotten manual, or some profound insight. Taesung looked at his system. Then he laughed. He had seen this exact structure before, not in aerospace, in a magical girl anime. Months earlier, Taesung had watched Cypher Witch Academy because the thumbnail was attractive. The series used fictional spell circles built from rotating symbol checks. The system had rewarded cryptographic intuition as a side effect. At the time, Taesung had considered it a minor skill. Now he combined it with Arc's checksum logic. The validation code was not truly random. It rotated according to the satellite's internal time counter and previous authentication result. Taesung predicted the next valid window. 31 seconds. He prepared the command. 20 seconds. Janice began another reroute. 10. M0 changed attitude. 5. Taesung sent the packet. The satellite vanished from the network map. For one terrible second, nobody knew what that meant. Then a status message arrived from the operator. M0 had entered emergency safe mode. Janice transfer failed. The command center exploded with noise. Engineers shouted. People hugged. Rand screamed something in German. Mira jumped onto Taesung's back and nearly knocked him into the desk. Yuna hugged him from the front at the same time, trapping him between 2 extremely successful women, while cameras from a secure government conference were still active. Sora tried to tell everyone Taesung needed oxygen. Then she hugged him too. Taesung could no longer move. He decided this was a good problem. On the offshore platform, Arc attempted to wipe Janice. He failed. By then, international authorities had cut most external links. Val provided architecture details. Daydream's verification mesh preserved evidence. Arclight isolated the remaining ground nodes. Arc was arrested before sunrise. The crisis ended not with an explosion, but with thousands of engineers manually restarting systems while exhausted operators drank coffee and cursed predictive software. The world learned how close it had come to allowing one hidden network to quietly control everything from freight schedules to satellites. Taesung learned something more important. He had missed 3 new episodes during the crisis. He watched them before sleeping. The next 2 weeks were madness. Governments wanted Taesung at hearings. Universities wanted him at conferences. Technology companies wanted Daydream's verification mesh. Satellite operators wanted his safety architecture. Streaming platforms wanted him in advertisements. One company offered him a lifetime premium subscription. Taesung accepted that meeting before several government meetings. Priorities mattered. Daydream's valuation tripled. Arclight gained billions in new infrastructure security contracts. Rand's factories received orders for hardened local control equipment. Mira's fund made so much money from correctly positioning around the recovery that financial journalists began calling her the Queen of Crisis Investing. She liked the title enough to pretend she had not already commissioned it on a coffee mug. Sora used anonymized data from the crisis response fatigue studies to publish a major paper on expert cognition under pressure. She excluded Taesung from the dataset because he violated every normal statistical assumption. Taesung considered that another achievement. Val avoided criminal charges related to Janice because he had cooperated extensively and turned over evidence. Though regulators dismantled most of the old Meridian network, he remained rich, irritated, and strangely friendly with Tae-sung. Junhyuk's story ended differently. Investigators discovered that while he had approved aggressive data acquisition for Oracle, he had not known Janus existed. The revelation reduced some of his legal exposure, but did nothing for his reputation. He requested a private meeting with Tae-sung. They met in Daydream's rooftop garden. Junhyuk looked thinner and less polished than before. For the first time, he did not arrive with an entourage. He asked how Tae-sung kept winning. Tae-sung considered giving a clever answer. Instead, he told the truth. He watched anime. Junhyuk stared at him. Months of investigations, spying, competitive analysis, and obsession had produced the same answer Tae-sung had given on the Helios stage. Junhyuk began laughing, at first quietly, then harder. He laughed until he had to sit down. Tae-sung poured him tea. Junhyuk eventually admitted that he still did not believe him. Tae-sung said that was fine. He did not need belief. He had subtitles. The meeting ended without revenge, reconciliation, or dramatic friendship. Junhyuk simply left. A month later, rumors said he had started a small robotics company without family money. Tae-sung wished him luck. Competition was fun when nobody tried to control global infrastructure. With the crisis finished, Tae-sung faced the one thing he had been avoiding since Daydream began. What did he actually want? Not philosophically. Tae-sung had no interest in standing on a mountain and discovering the meaning of life. He wanted a practical answer. He already had money beyond anything he could spend normally. He had a company that could build almost whatever he imagined. He had access to laboratories, private jets, islands, supercomputers, and restaurants where menus did not list prices. He had 3 brilliant women in his life who each refused to behave simply. And he had the system. The system still gave him intelligence every time he finished an episode. There was only one obvious long-term problem. Anime was finite. Tae-sung's streaming spreadsheet contained thousands of unwatched episodes. But for the first time, he began thinking years ahead. What happened when he eventually ran out of useful series? He stared at the question for 1 minute. Then he realized the solution was embarrassingly obvious. If Tae-sung needed more anime to grow, he would simply make more anime. The next morning, Daydream Labs announced the acquisition of Aurora Animation, one of the country's most respected studios. Nobody understood why a technology company bought an animation studio. Tae-sung understood perfectly. He was vertically integrating his intelligent supply chain. Aurora Animation's employees expected a technology takeover to be miserable. They imagined executives cutting budgets, replacing artists with software, and demanding 12 sequels to whatever sold the most merchandise. Then Tae-sung walked into the studio carrying a bag of pastries and asked what everyone needed to make better shows. The answers came cautiously at first. More time, better equipment, higher pay for junior animators, fewer impossible production schedules, a proper cafeteria, a nap room. Tae-sung approved all of it. The nap room became 3 nap rooms. The cafeteria hired one of Tae-sung's favorite chefs. Production budgets increased. Aurora's exhausted artists began looking at their new owner like he was some kind of mythical creature. They had no idea that Tae-sung's motives were deeply selfish. Happy animators produced more episodes. More episodes produced more permanent intelligence. Tae-sung had accidentally discovered benevolent management through greed. He considered himself extremely efficient. His first request was simple. He wanted Aurora to create an original science adventure anime, where every technical concept was reviewed by real specialists, but the plot remained completely ridiculous. The studio developed Starship Convenience Store, about a lazy cashier operating the last convenience store at the edge of a collapsing galaxy. The cashier solved alien wars using logistics, food, accounting, robotics, and occasionally coupons. Tae-sung loved it before animation even began. Sora reviewed the medical science. Yuna arranged ArcLight technical consultants. Mira turned merchandising into a global business before episode 1 existed. Rand demanded that the engineering team correct a fictional loading crane in the concept art. Nobody had asked Rand. He sent a 20-page diagram anyway. The series premiered 9 months later. It became a worldwide hit. Tae-sung watched every episode the second it released. The system rewarded him normally. That confirmed an important detail. It did not care whether Tae-sung owned the studio. As long as the episode was genuinely completed media and he had not watched it before, the reward counted. Tae-sung nearly hugged the system window. Instead, he ordered Aurora to fund 6 more original series. The studio president fainted when he saw the budget. Daydream's expansion became unstoppable. The company built medical robotics with Sora's lab. It licensed secure artificial intelligence infrastructure through ArcLight. It manufactured mobility platforms with Rand's industrial network. It launched entertainment technology with Aurora. Mira created a media and investment division that somehow made money from every direction at once. Tae-sung remained chief executive in title. In practice, his schedule looked insane to anyone who had never seen the system. Monday morning, watch 4 episodes. Monday afternoon, review battery research. Tuesday morning, watch 6 episodes. Tuesday afternoon, redesign a surgical robot. Wednesday, sleep late, watch an entire fantasy comedy. attend one board meeting, cancel another board meeting because the season finale was longer than expected. Thursday, advise a satellite company, cook dinner, watch 3 episodes. Friday, no meetings unless civilization was in immediate danger. Employees learned that immediate danger had a strict definition. A $10 million contract was not immediate danger. A server outage was not immediate danger. A government minister demanding a meeting was definitely not immediate danger. An anime service going down during release night was treated as a priority 1 event. Daydream's network engineers became the best streaming reliability team in the industry purely out of self-defense. Taesung's romantic life also settled into a rhythm that would have looked impossible from the outside. Yuna never stopped being competitive. Mira never stopped provoking her. Sora never stopped pretending she was above the competition, while very clearly keeping track of everything. Taesung stopped pretending he wanted a simple answer. He liked all 3 women. They all knew it. Nobody involved was confused. That did not make them peaceful. One Saturday, Taesung rented an entire coastal resort for a daydream celebration after the company crossed a $100 billion valuation. The official event ended at sunset. The unofficial event continued in Taesung's private villa. Mira arrived first wearing a loose white shirt over her swimsuit and carrying champagne. Yuna arrived with a bottle of wine she claimed was better. Sora arrived with fruit, sunscreen, and a complaint that both alcohol choices were dehydrating. Taesung opened the door and decided not to ask why all 3 had brought overnight bags. He had survived Janus. He knew when curiosity was dangerous. They spent the evening beside the private pool, eating grilled seafood Taesung cooked himself. Mira demanded music. Yuna chose something calm. Mira changed it. Yuna changed it back. Sora confiscated the speaker. Taesung watched them argue from a lounge chair and felt richer than any number in his bank account could explain. Later, Mira accused Yuna of hiding Taesung's favorite dessert in the villa refrigerator. Yuna denied it. Sora opened the refrigerator and found the dessert behind a bottle of sparkling water. Mira declared fraud. Yuna grabbed the box and ran. What followed was less like a gathering of famous executives and more like an anime beach episode written by someone with no respect for dignity. Mira chased Yuna into the bedroom. Sora attempted to mediate and got pulled onto the enormous bed. Within seconds, all 3 women were laughing, playfully wrestling over the dessert box, tossing pillows, and blaming each other for starting it. Mira's oversized shirt slipped from one shoulder. Yuna's hair came loose. Sora lost her glasses somewhere under a pillow and demanded everyone stop moving until she found them. Taesung stood in the doorway holding 4 forks. Nobody noticed him for several seconds. Then Mira threw a pillow at his face. Taesung caught it. His sports anime reflexes remained undefeated. He calmly announced that he had brought enough forks for everyone. The fight stopped instantly. Once again, resource abundance solved conflict. The accountant who became king would have been proud. They ate dessert on the bed while an anime played on the wall projector. Mira rested against one side of Taesung. Yuna took the other. Sora stretched across the foot of the bed at first, then gradually moved upward until her head was resting against his leg. At some point, the episode ended, and nobody selected the next one. Taesung realized all 3 women were watching him instead of the screen. Mira asked whether he was happy. It was the kind of question that normally invited a complicated answer. Taesung gave a simple one. Yes. Yuna kissed him first. Mira complained that she always moved too quickly. Then Mira kissed him too, just to restore competitive balance. Sora covered her face with both hands and announced that everyone was behaving irrationally. Taesung reminded her she was still lying across his legs. Sora lowered her hands, considered this evidence, and kissed him anyway. The system displayed 3 simultaneous heart rate notices. Taesung finally discovered how to disable romantic biometric notifications. It was his most emotionally satisfying technical achievement of the year. The next morning, they ate breakfast overlooking the ocean. Nobody gave the relationship a complicated label. Nobody needed one. Yuna still had Arclight. Mira still had her fund. Sora still had her research. Taesung still had Daydream, his system, and a streaming queue long enough to threaten civilization. They simply kept choosing to spend more of their time together. For Taesung, that was perfect. A year after he had been fired from Orion, a documentary crew requested an interview at his original apartment building. Taesung agreed because Ms. Lim had been asking when he would visit. The old building looked smaller than he remembered. Mr. Huang had replaced the pressure regulator, renovated the lobby, and mounted a framed photograph of Taesung near the entrance with the words, "Former resident, always paid eventually." Taesung considered suing him. He laughed instead. Ms. Lim fed him enough homemade food for 6 people and complained that rich people became too skinny. Taesung did not tell her he had eaten at a private resort the day before. She would have fed him anyway. The documentary crew asked to see his old apartment. A university student lived there now. The room was exactly as tiny as before. The bed still nearly touched the kitchen. The desk still blocked half the refrigerator. The Wi-Fi router was newer. Taesung stood near the doorway and remembered the day everything had changed. Fired, broke, dumped, lying in bed with frozen dumplings and no plan beyond one more episode. The interviewer asked what he would tell his past self if he could return to that day. Taesung thought carefully. Then he said he would tell himself to upgrade the internet plans sooner. The interviewer waited for something inspirational. Nothing came. Taesung had no interest in pretending he had suffered toward a grand moral conclusion. He had gotten lucky. Then he had squeezed that luck until it produced a private jet. That was enough. Outside the building, a giant daydream advertisement covered the side of a tower across the street. It showed Momo serving snacks beside the words, "Make time for what you actually like." Team leader Park happened to pass the intersection on his way to a client meeting. He saw Taesung surrounded by cameras. He saw the advertisement. He saw Daydream's logo reflected in the glass of a luxury car waiting at the curb. Park stopped for several seconds. Taesung noticed him. Their eyes met across the sidewalk. Park gave an awkward nod. Taesung nodded back. Then his phone vibrated. A new episode had released. Taesung got into the car. Some priorities never changed. The next 3 years moved even faster. Daydream crossed into robotics, medicine, energy, entertainment, transportation, and aerospace. Taesung completed thousands of episodes. His permanent intelligence climbed so high the system stopped showing a normal numerical comparison and simply labeled his cognitive synthesis, transcendent human range. Taesung found the label dramatic. He liked it. His skills became absurd. A historical anime gave him architecture. So he designed a hotel shaped around natural airflow and reduced cooling costs by 30%. A music anime gave him composition. So he accidentally wrote the opening theme for an Aurora series after the hired composer got sick. The song reached #1. A farming anime gave him agricultural science. So Daydream built automated greenhouses on unused city rooftops. A diving anime gave him marine systems knowledge. So he redesigned part of Vale's yacht and made it quieter. Vale complained that Taesung had turned a vacation into an engineering review. Then he ordered the redesign. A legal anime gave Taesung enough specialized knowledge to frighten Daydream's own attorneys. They requested that he stop reading contracts during lunch because it made them nervous. A magical idol anime gave him stage presence. Mira forced him to appear at Aurora's anniversary concert. Taesung walked onto a stadium stage expecting to say a few words. The crowd began chanting his name. He somehow ended up singing one verse of the theme song he had written. The video reached 100 million views. Taesung refused all future musical appearances. Mira kept the recording as blackmail. Daydream eventually built its own research campus on an artificial island near the coast. The campus had laboratories, apartments, gardens, restaurants, sports facilities, a small hospital, an animation studio, a private cinema, and a ridiculous circular tower containing Taesung's office at the top. Employees nicknamed it Lazy Island. Taesung made the nickname official. Investors objected. Consumers loved it. The island became famous enough that tourists took boat trips just to photograph it from outside the secure zone. Taesung lived in a residence connected to the tower by a private garden walkway. Yuna kept an apartment there for long work weeks. Mira claimed a guest suite and redesigned it without asking. Sora's research center occupied the entire eastern wing, so she effectively lived there too. Their lives became intertwined so gradually that eventually nobody remembered when staying over had turned into keeping wardrobes there. Taesung did not complain. One winter evening, he sat in the residence theater while snow fell over the ocean outside. Yuna was beside him reviewing a report she claimed she was not working on. Mira was lying across the other end of the couch browsing fashion concepts for Aurora merchandise. Sora had fallen asleep with her head on Taesung's shoulder after a 14-hour experiment. Momo rolled in carrying hot drinks. On the giant screen, Starship Convenience Store reached its 100th episode. The fictional lazy cashier had somehow become emperor of 3 galaxies, while still refusing to work the night shift. Taesung respected him deeply. The episode ended. The credits rolled. The system chimed. Episode completion verified. Permanent intelligence increase. +1. Taesung smiled. After thousands of episodes, the message still felt good. Then another window appeared. Milestone reached. Host has acquired mastery-level competency in 100 recognized domains. A third window followed. System evolution available. Taesung sat upright. Yuna noticed immediately. She asked what was wrong. Taesung said he had remembered something. He did not explain. The women had long ago accepted that sometimes Taesung stared at empty air and then invented something worth $10 billion. The system window changed. Current growth source. Completed animated episodes. Evolution option detected. Adaptive media expansion. Taesung's heartbeat accelerated. He selected the option. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then every light in the room flickered. The system interface turned gold. Evolution successful. Additional eligible formats unlocked. Animated films, original video productions, interactive narrative media. Taesung nearly stood up and cheered. Movies counted now. Interactive animation counted. The growth supply had just multiplied. Then one final line appeared. Unknown broadcast source detected. Taesung froze. Below the message was a frequency that did not match any satellite, streaming service, terrestrial broadcaster, or network protocol he recognized. The system offered one option: attempt connection. Taesung stared at it. Sora woke because his shoulder had moved. Mira asked why he suddenly looked so interested. Yuna closed her report. Taesung considered pressing the button. Then he looked around the room. He already had everything his old self could have imagined. A fortune so large he stopped checking it. A company built around doing whatever interested him. A private island campus. The ability to learn almost anything by watching shows from bed. 3 extraordinary women who had become permanent parts of his chaotic life. Friends, partners, laboratories, aircraft, studios, robots, chefs, and an anime pipeline he personally owned. He had turned getting fired for laziness into the greatest career strategy in human history. There was no emergency, no villain, no deadline. So Taesung did what Taesung always did when confronted with a mysterious new opportunity. He checked whether there were any new episodes first. There were 2. He watched both. Yuna fell asleep halfway through the first. Mira stole the blanket during the second. Sora woke long enough to steal it back. Taesung sat between them, completely comfortable, while snow-covered Lazy Island and Momo quietly refilled the snacks. When the second episode ended, the system rewarded him again. Only then did Taesung return to the golden window. Unknown broadcast source detected. Attempt connection? He selected yes. Static filled the system interface. For 3 seconds, nothing appeared. Then an image formed. It looked like anime. But Taesung had never seen the studio logo. He had never seen the language written across the title card. He had never seen the impossible city floating behind the characters, or the 2 moons hanging in the sky. The system translated the title automatically. Welcome, viewer from World 7. Taesung's smile slowly widened. On the couch, Mira opened one eye and asked whether whatever he was looking at meant more work. Taesung leaned back, reached for a chip, and watched the mysterious episode begin. He said it looked more like overtime. For Taesung, that was perfect, because his overtime came with a couch, unlimited snacks, permanent intelligence, beautiful company, and apparently an entire new world of anime waiting to be watched. And somewhere far beyond the signal, something on the other side had just noticed that World 7 finally had a viewer.
If you want to watch more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel. And don't forget to leave a comment and click the notification bell so you won't miss my next videos. Thank you for watching and see you on my channel.